What is UP Infinite Novel Audio? Welcome back. We are back in the world of Marvel, the system that arrived 18 years late, Chapter 1, and I have been waiting to narrate this one. If you thought the premise was wild, a transmigrator stuck in the Marvel universe for 18 years with no system, no mutation, and no spider bite, you have no idea what's about to change. No spoilers, just buckle up. Let's get into it. Chapter 1, the system that arrived 18 years late, binding Gwen. New York, Empire State University. September sunlight pierced through the thin mist, casting its glow upon the vintage red brick teaching buildings. At the school gate, a vintage bicycle came to a steady stop by the roadside. A long, slender leg dismounted, stepping onto the ground. Johnny Gilda casually straightened his black bangs, ruffled by the wind, revealing a face that could overshadow even Hollywood male stars. Hiss, who is that guy? Are we getting a new campus heartthrob? Oh my god, his eyes seem to have magic, I'm going to faint. With that height he must be at least 1.9 meters, right? So handsome. The girls passing by instantly slowed their pace, their whispers buzzing. Not far away, a girl with long platinum blonde hair and a wild demeanor also stopped involuntarily. Felicia Hardy, the future Black Cat. At this moment her red lips were slightly parted, and her eyes were fixed on that retreating figure. Hey Felicia, why aren't you moving? We're going to be late. Beside her, Peter Parker, carrying a backpack and looking somewhat bookish, asked in confusion. SHH, don't talk. Felicia didn't even turn her head, her gaze almost greedy. Peter, did you see that boy? He's definitely the most handsome guy I've ever seen. Huh, where is he? Peter looked in the direction she indicated but only caught a glimpse of a tall, straight back disappearing at the end of the tree-lined path. Walking along the campus's tree-lined path, Gilda had a faint smile playing on his lips. This feeling of being watched, no matter how long it lasted, never grew old. The first class is biology and Professor Connors himself is teaching. Tusk. Gilda stroked his chin, calculating in his mind. In this Marvel universe, clinging to powerful figures is an art. Although Professor Connors would eventually turn into that slippery green lizard. In the field of biology, this old man was definitely a top expert. Moreover, he had spent the summer frantically studying and experimenting. He had finally managed to get into Osborn's corporate lab as an intern and had received extremely high praise from Professor Connors. This investment in connections was a sure profit. Speaking of which, Gilda was actually a transmigrator. And a fetal transmigrator, having survived in this perilous Marvel universe for a full 18 years. In his previous life, he was a seasoned Marvel fan. He especially loved the dating game, oh no, I'm surrounded by Gwen, Wanda, and Polaris. He had thought that since he transmigrated, there should at least be a ding sound. And then he'd punch Thanos and kick Odin right. But what happened? No system. No mutation. He didn't even get bitten by a radioactive spider. Aside from a large apartment in downtown New York and several $1 million in savings left by his parents, who both died in this life. And this devastatingly handsome face, he had almost nothing. Good thing I'm smart, I was a top student at Tsinghua and Peking University in my previous life. Gilda sighed, feeling a bit helpless. In this world where aliens invade and the purple potato monster snaps his fingers at every turn. Ordinary people were like ants by the roadside, liable to be crushed at any moment. So he could only study desperately, trying to change his fate through knowledge. To see if he could research a super soldier serum. As he was thinking, he had already reached the teaching building. Suddenly, a striking figure entered his line of sight. It was a girl wearing a light blue shirt and a short skirt. Her golden hair was tied back with a black hair tie, with a few strands falling beside her fair neck. She was holding several books, standing on the steps and looking around. The sunlight fell on her face, as if coated with a soft focus filter. Gwen Stacy. Gilda's pupils contracted slightly. Even though he had seen her countless times in movies, the impact of seeing her in person still made his heart skip a beat. That blend of intellect and youthfulness was simply made to drive him to crime. Tisk, those legs, that aura, truly worthy of being the first love goddess. Gilda secretly praised her. Just then, his peripheral vision caught a familiar figure rushing from the other side. Peter Parker. This guy had clearly seen Gwen too. The two were walking towards each other. Just then, a voice he had waited 18 years for suddenly sounded in his mind. Ding detected that the host has encountered a classic high-quality Marvel female, Gwen Stacy. The many children, many blessings system is activation successful. System description: this system is dedicated to creating the strongest family. As long as the host has offspring with classic high-quality females of the Marvel Universe, you will receive top-tier rewards from the Dragon Ball world. Rewards include but are not limited to Bukyujutsu, Kai Blast, Solar Flare, Kaioken, Instant Transmission. You can even increase your base combat power, gain Saiyan bloodline, and transform into a Super Saiyan. Target detected: Gwen Stacy, do you wish to bind? Gilda paused in his steps, almost unable to resist laughing out loud on the spot. What the heck? Such a good thing. Many children, many blessings, Dragon Ball system. This wasn't just a cheat, this was a golden thigh. One must know that the Dragon Ball world's power system was practically a dimensionality reduction attack in Marvel. Characters like Raditz with a mere 1000+ power level could casually blow up cities. By the Frieza saga, planet busting was common. If he could transform into a Super Saiyan, Thanos, the Celestials, wouldn't they all be mere minnows, one punched into oblivion? Gilda felt a rush of blood to his head. Not only could he become stronger, but he could also solve his personal problems along the way. It was simply tailor-made for a gentleman like him. Bind must bind. Gilda roared frantically in his mind. To protect Earth for universal peace, Gilda was duty-bound. From now on, Big Bear Wanda, Tsundere Polaris, aloof White Queen, wild Black Cat, none should be missed. Let's all work hard to become stronger. However, one must eat one bite at a time and walk one step at a time. The primary goal now was Gwen, right in front of him. Gilda glanced at Peter Parker, who was approaching, his eyes instantly becoming sharp. Sorry, Peter, for the peace of the universe, I'll bear the burden of a dangerous woman like Gwen. Gilda adjusted his collar, took long strides, and accelerated directly. Just as Peter Parker gathered his courage, ready to say his first hi to Gwen, a tall figure precisely blocked the path between him and Gwen. Excuse me, classmate. Gilda didn't even look back, just gently nudged with his broad shoulder. The already slender Peter lost his balance from this sudden shove. He stumbled back a few steps, directly pushed into the stream of people entering the classroom. Wait. Peter's outstretched hand hung in midair, watching helplessly as he was swept into the teaching building's main entrance by the crowd. He didn't even touch Gwen's clothes. Done. Gilda curled his lips into a mischievous smile, then adopted a gentlemanly and magnetic tone. He turned to face the somewhat startled Gwen. Hi, classmate, are you going to Professor Connor's biology class? Gwen was momentarily stunned. She looked up, and what met her eyes was a clean, handsome, and sunny face. Especially those eyes, as if they held some kind of attraction. Yes. Gwen nodded subconsciously, a faint blush appearing on her cheeks. How did you know? I saw you holding Advanced Genomics, which is Professor Connor's most recommended book. Gilda pointed to the book in her arms, flashing a perfectly timed smile. Let me introduce myself, I'm Johnny Gilda, also a student of Professor Connor's. When I interned at Osborne Labs, I heard the professor mention a genius named Gwen among the new students. I thought that genius must be you, right? This series of moves was smooth as flowing water. He not only showcased his identity as a top student, but also praised her through Professor Connor's words. And incidentally displayed his handsome advantage. A perfect strike. Sure enough, Gwen's eyes instantly lit up. You interned at Osborne Labs, oh my, it's so hard to get in there. Gwen said in surprise, her initial sense of unfamiliarity largely dissipating. I'm Gwen Stacy, nice to meet you, classmate Gilda. Just call me Johnny. Gilda smoothly pulled out his phone and waved it. Since we're both Professor Connor's students, there will definitely be a lot of academic exchange in the future. Do you mind exchanging contact information? I happen to have a few of the professor's latest research project notes, perhaps you'd be interested. Academic exchange. Who seriously exchanges academics? But this reason was simply impeccable. Gwen was not only a top student but also one with a strong thirst for knowledge. Coupled with Gilda's highly deceptive appearance and Professor Connor's endorsement. Of course that would be great. Gwen barely hesitated, confidently taking out her phone. The two quickly exchanged numbers. The moment Gwen's number was saved, the system's prompt sounded in Gilda's mind again. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully establishing initial contact with Gwen Stacy, binding successful. Binding reward skill solar flare. Skill description: a crane school martial arts technique that instantly emits a flash of light using Kai, blinding enemies. An essential divine skill for escaping or ambushing. Ding! Detected that the host has successfully taken the first step in Many Children Many Blessings, issuing an additional newbie reward. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the perception and application of Kai. Host's current base combat power increased to 10 points. Note: a normal adult earthling with a gun has a combat power of approximately 5. Boom! A warm current instantly surged through his entire body. Gilda felt every cell in his body cheering. That was Kai. Although it was only 10 combat power, sounding like double that of a weakling. In reality, this was already enough strength to take bullets with his bare body and dismantle a Gundam with his bare hands. Gilda clenched his fist, feeling the surging power within him. He looked at Gwen, who was smiling radiantly in front of him, his gaze growing even more fervent. This was just the beginning of their acquaintance. If they were to have in-depth academic exchanges in the future, wouldn't he soar? Let's go, Gwen. Gilda naturally stepped aside, gesturing for her to go first. I've saved a seat for you in the front row. Thank you, Johnny. The two walked into the teaching building side by side. Chapter 2: We can chat while we eat. Soon the two of them arrived at the classroom. The lecture hall was large, capable of accommodating 200 people. As Gilda expected, due to Professor Connor's special consideration. The best seat in the first row, right in the center with the best audio-visual effects, was still empty. Gilda, ever the gentleman, pulled out a chair and motioned for Gwen to sit down. As for the red-haired girl next to them, whose backpack was originally occupying the seat, Gilda simply gave her a smile that could melt icebergs and slightly raised an eyebrow. Beautiful, could you let my friend have this seat? I'll treat you to coffee another day. Oh, of course. The red-haired girl's face instantly turned as red as a tomato, and she clumsily grabbed her backpack and ran to the back row. Before leaving, she didn't forget to slip a note with her INS account into Gilda's hand. This series of actions was smooth and effortless, leaving Gwen beside him stunned. It seems you're very popular at school. Gwen said teasingly after sitting down, her tone carrying a hint of sourness that she herself didn't notice. That's because they haven't seen a true genius. Gilda casually crumpled the note into a ball and accurately flicked it into a trash can 2 meters away. Then he turned to look at Gwen, his eyes clear and sincere. In my eyes, all those common beauties combined are not as charming as a girl who can understand advanced genomics. Hiss, those words were a bit unfair. Gwen felt her heart skip a beat and quickly lowered her head, pretending to flip through her book, but her earlobes quietly turned a shade of pink. This guy, not only is he handsome, but he also speaks so nicely. Who could resist that? Just then, a light blue, translucent panel popped up in front of Gilda, visible only to him. Target scan complete. Name: Gwen Stacy. Identity: daughter of New York City Police Chief George Stacy, Empire State University freshman. Figure data: B86C/W58/H88. Emotional history: none. Interaction count: 0. Current favorability: 50. Ambiguous. Good heavens! Gilda couldn't help but whistle inwardly. This data is simply perfect. Especially the interaction count of 0. In this open America, it's practically a rare animal, comparable to a giant panda. As expected of the white moonlight in the hearts of many Marvel fans. If she were to wear that tight spider suit in the future, hiss, don't think about it, any more thinking and I'll be paying tribute to Homelander. Ding, detected target favorability reached 50, issuing phased reward. Congratulations host, you have received basic combat power plus 100. Host's current combat power, 110, equivalent to 11 Captain America's or 11 Captain America's strength. System prompt, favorability reward mechanism explanation. Favorability 0, acquaintance, first meeting reward. Favorability 50, ambiguous, phased reward. Favorability 100, infatuated, large reward. Successful conception, special skill reward. Childbirth, ultimate reward including but not limited to Super Saiyan transformation, Ultra Instinct experience card, etc. Looking at this series of reward lists, Gilda felt his DNA stir. Is this the legendary system? Loved it, loved it. If he could win Gwen over, wouldn't he just take off directly? Although a combat power of 110 is nothing in the Dragon Ball world. On this Marvel Earth, he's at least a walking weapon. Even Parker, who swings around in a red tight suit, usually only has a few tens of tons of strength as Spider-Man. This is nothing compared to him now, it's about a 50-50 match. As long as he works harder, finds a few more confidants to chat with and boosts his combat power. Then when he activates the Kaioken or even transforms into a Super Saiyan, HMPH, then forget about the purple potato monster. Even against Odin, the king of gods, Gilda is confident he can arm wrestle him. He could even go to Asgard and deeply discuss the origin of life with the goddess of death. Then go to Mount Olympus to join Zeus, that old pervert, for a god's party. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Just as Gilda was envisioning his beautiful future life, Professor Connors walked into the classroom. Although this old man only had one hand, his aura was quite strong. All right, everyone, quiet down. Connors tapped the blackboard, his gaze sweeping across the room. Finally, he paused on Gilda for a second, nodding in satisfaction. Today we're going to discuss the interspecies genetic inheritance characteristics of reptiles. Who can tell me? Why is it difficult for the regenerative genes of lizards to be effective in mammals? As soon as the question was posed, the entire room fell silent. This was a topic usually covered by seniors or even graduate students, and for these freshmen it was practically an enigma. In the corner, Peter Parker pushed up his glasses, about to raise his hand, but then hesitated. Such a show-off move, if not 100% correct, could easily lead to ridicule. However, before his hand could even go up. Because of rejection, Professor. In the first row, Gilda raised his hand and then stood up to speak. Mammalian immune systems recognize R complex as an invading virus. Unless a formula called the decay rate algorithm can be found to balance this rejection, the cells will collapse instantly. This was a core knowledge point from the future, Amazing Spider-Man plot, and Gilda had long known it by heart. Professor Connor's eyes instantly lit up, his fanaticism at meeting a kindred spirit completely undisguised. Bingo, absolutely correct, Johnny, it seems your time in my lab wasn't wasted. This child is a genius. Connors was unsparing in his praise. The surrounding classmates all cast admiring glances. Gwen next to him even had stars in her eyes. Although she knew a little, she definitely couldn't pinpoint the core algorithm problem as incisively as Gilda. You're amazing, Johnny. Gwen whispered, her voice full of admiration. I didn't even think of that. Ding, Gwen Stacy's favorability has increased to 65, developing affection. Listen to that wonderful prompt sound. Gilda's lips curled into a slight smile, he turned his head and winked at Gwen, then sat down. Basic operation, no need to thank. Although Gwen didn't understand the slang, it didn't stop her from finding the boy in front of her even more charming. System, can I directly communicate when favorability reaches 100? Gilda asked inwardly, his tone somewhat impatient. Theoretically, yes, host, when favorability reaches 100. It means the target is willing to do anything for you. However, considering target Gwen Stacy's personality setting, which leans conservative and independent to achieve the final step, it not only requires emotional groundwork but also involves dealing with a key NPC, her father, George Stacy. Chief George. That stubborn old man. Gilda stroked his chin. Indeed, in the original story, George was a doting father who valued his daughter more than his own life. Peter Parker's struggles were precisely because he couldn't get past the father-in-law's approval. Understood, once I handle the father-in-law, half the battle is won. Gilda had a plan in mind. Isn't he just a police chief? In this New York with its persistently high crime rate, if he occasionally helps out, or sends some achievements his way, he won't have trouble dealing with an old man, right? 2 classes flew by with Gilda's various displays of brilliance. As soon as the bell rang, Gwen proactively extended an invitation. Johnny, do you want to go to the cafeteria for lunch together? We can chat while we eat. It would be my honor. Gilda smiled and stood up, casually helping Gwen pick up her heavy professional books. This gesture caused Gwen's favorability to fluctuate slightly again. The two walked out of the classroom side by side, like a perfect couple. At the doorway, Peter Parker, who was about to leave, paused. He looked at Gwen's radiant smile and felt an inexplicable emptiness in his heart. It was as if something that originally belonged to him had been quietly taken away. Strange, why do I care so much? Peter shook his head, forced a bitter smile. He was about to turn around and buy a cheap sandwich for lunch. However, just then, "Yo, isn't this our wimpy Parker?" A voice full of mockery and malice rang out in the hallway. Immediately after, several tall members of the school's football team surrounded him. Leading them was the burly Flash Thompson. He wore a tight t-shirt, his muscles bulging. On his face was that typical American bully's smirk. "What, going to gnaw on your dry bread in the corner again?" Flash slapped the book out of Peter's hand, sending books scattering across the floor. Peter's face instantly flushed red. He squatted down to pick up the books, but Flash stepped on his hand with his foot. "Hey, look at me when I'm talking, wimp." Students passing by quickly steered clear. No one dared to provoke the school bully. Peter gritted his teeth, not resisting. At this point, he was still just an ordinary college student with no power to fight back. Facing such a physical disparity, he had no chance of winning. "Stop it!" A clear but angry voice rang out. Gwen walked over with a frown, her face filled with disgust. "Thompson, what are you doing? This is a university, not your arena." Seeing Gwen, Flash's expression stiffened for a moment, but quickly returned to his usual rogue demeanor. "Oh, isn't this the beautiful Ms. Stacy? What, are you protecting this nerd?" Flash whistled, his gaze boldly appraising Gwen. "I'm just teaching him some social etiquette, right, Parker?" Saying that, he pressed down harder with his foot, making Peter's face turn pale from pain. Gwen's chest heaved with anger. She was about to step forward to argue, but a strong hand stopped her. "This kind of heavy lifting is better left to men." Gilda handed the books to Gwen and slowly rolled up his sleeves. He looked at Flash Thompson as if he were a walking favorability gift package. This scenario was practically tailor-made for him to show off. In the original story, Peter could only endure the bullying or get his revenge after mutating. But now, "Sorry, Gilda, will take this hero saves the beauty script." "Hey, big guy." Gilda walked up to Flash, although they were about the same height. The calm and composed aura he exuded somehow managed to overpower the other party. "I'll give you 3 seconds to take your hoof off my classmate's hand. Otherwise, I don't mind giving you a free orthopedic surgery." Chapter 3, True Strength Relies on the System. Regarding Gilda's provocative warning, Flash Thompson clearly didn't show even a shred of fear. On the contrary, he looked like he had heard the funniest joke of the century. On his fleshy face, his expression instantly shifted from shock to extreme disdain. He lifted his foot from Peter's hand and turned around. He scrutinized Gilda from head to toe with the look one gives a rare, intellectually challenged creature. "Hey." Flash dramatically cupped his hand to his ear, pretending to listen closely. He then burst into jarring, wild laughter. "Listen, everyone, listen up. What did our new school heartthrob just say? Orthopedic surgery." Flash took a step forward, relying on the thick pectoral muscles of a football player. He tried to physically intimidate Gilda. Although their heights were nearly identical, Gilda's tall, well-proportioned, model-like physique certainly seemed slight compared to Flash's bulky frame. You, a pretty boy who relies on his looks. Do you think this is some kind of idle drama, saving the damsel in distress? Wait, no, are you trying to save the weakling? Tusk, 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 could it be? A disgusting smirk appeared on Flash's face. His eyes flickered back and forth between Gilda and Peter on the floor. You're not interested in women, but you've fallen for this nerd instead. The surrounding hangers-on immediately joined in with a burst of laughter, accompanied by a chorus of whistles. Peter Parker's face, still on the floor, turned beet red. The embarrassment and humiliation made him wish he could just disappear into the floor. Being bullied was one thing, but now he had dragged the person who helped him into this public shamming. This caused Peter's pitiful bit of self-esteem to sting. Enough, Flash. Peter abruptly stood up from the floor. Although his body was still slightly trembling from the pain, he bravely stepped in front of Gilda. This is between us, don't drag anyone else into it. And we're all classmates, you don't need to be so extreme. Peter's voice was shaking slightly, but this was the bravest he could be right now. However, classmates. The smile instantly vanished from Flash's face. It was replaced by the cold indifference known as class distinction. Wake up, Parker. Who said I'm your classmate? In this school I am the king and you. Flash contemptuously patted Peter's faded shirt. The force of the pat made Peter cough. You're just an ant that can be crushed at any time. After speaking, Flash ignored Peter. Instead, he redirected his aggressive gaze toward Gilda. He leaned in close, so close that Gilda could smell the tobacco on his breath. You punk, you've got guts. Johnny Gilda, right? I'll remember you. Flash lowered his voice, his tone filled with malice. In this school, sticking your neck out comes with a price. After school this afternoon, the dead-end alley behind the school. If you're a man, don't run. I'll show you exactly how orthopedic surgery is done. After delivering this threat, Flash let out a cold snort. He swaggered away with his arrogant lackeys, pushing through the crowd, leaving behind scattered books and the surrounding onlookers whispering among themselves. Calm returned to the hallway. Peter knelt down dejectedly and began gathering the scattered books. His hands were still trembling slightly, and the dusty shoe print on the back of his hand was particularly glaring. Classmate Gilda. Peter looked up at Gilda with a complicated, apologetic gaze. Thank you for speaking up for me just now. But I'm really sorry for dragging you into this trouble. Flash, he has a strong background and he's serious, he really will corner you this afternoon. Seeing Peter's cautious demeanor, Gilda merely shrugged indifferently. He bent down and picked up the thickest book, Biochemistry. He lightly dusted it off and handed it to Peter. It's no big deal, Peter. Gilda still wore his faint smile. It was as if he wasn't the one who had just been threatened. Just standing up for what's right. Besides, someone needs to teach this muscle-brained ape how to walk upright, right? Gilda's voice was soft, yet conveyed a reassuring confidence. But this didn't relax Peter. He knew Flash too well. He was a mad dog. But Peter wanted to say more, but Gwen, standing beside them, interrupted him. It's all right, Peter and Johnny. Gwen quickly stepped forward, her delicate, pretty face etched with seriousness. My father is the chief of the New York Police Department. If Thompson actually dares to do anything excessive, I will immediately contact my dad. I refuse to believe he can act lawlessly in New York. As Gwen spoke, her eyes were resolute. She looked very much like a goddess of justice. However, Peter shook his head, a hint of bitterness appearing on his face. It's useless, Gwen. This will only be categorized as a student conflict or a brawl. The police, sorry, I'm not talking about your dad. Peter sighed, his voice dropping. They deal with so many major cases every day, they can't be bothered with petty skirmishes like this. What's more, if we call the police, my life at school will only get harder. That was the truth. This was the rule of American campuses. Informers and those who seek protection often face more severe isolation. Gwen opened her mouth wanting to retort but found she had nothing to say. Although she was bursting with a sense of justice, she wasn't a naive girl ignorant of social realities. All right, don't worry about me. Peter forced a smile and hugged the books in his arms tightly. I have to go now, I still have work at the library. Thank you, Gwen and Gilda. With that, Peter turned and fled, his retreating figure looking somewhat desolate and defeated. Watching Peter's retreating back, Gwen frowned, clenching her small fists. Are we just supposed to watch him get bullied? The rules of this world are truly disappointing sometimes. Gwen murmured softly, her tone full of frustration. Just then, a warm hand gently rested on her shoulder. Don't overthink it, Gwen. Gilda's voice sounded in her ear, carrying a strange magnetism. If rules can't solve a problem, there's always another way. Trust me, I will handle this matter. Gwen turned around, meeting Gilda's eyes, which were as deep as the sea. There was no panic in them, only the composure of someone in control of everything. That powerful confidence instantly calmed Gwen's previously troubled heart. Really? Gwen asked subconsciously. Of course. Gilda smiled slightly, the sunlight illuminated his profile, making him unfairly handsome. I never lie to pretty girls. Ding detected that Gwen Stacy has developed feelings of reliance towards the host, favorability plus 10. Current favorability, 75 budding affection. Hearing the system prompt in his mind, the smile on Gilda's face grew brighter. If it weren't for grinding favorability, he wouldn't bother saying so much nonsense. The police. Hi. In this Marvel universe, if the police were reliable, then Avengers should have disbanded long ago to sell roasted sweet potatoes. Not to mention Flash Thompson, whose family is a serious player who donated an entire building to the school. Expecting Chief George to arrest this kind of rich second generation. Arresting him just so he can have a cup of coffee and be baited out by a lawyer. Ridiculous. Although this universe doesn't seem to be entirely the MCU right now. Nor is it entirely the Amazing or the comics, it's more like a mashup. But one iron rule is universal. The poor rely on mutation, the rich rely on technology, and the true strong rely on the system. Gilda narrowed his eyes, glancing toward the direction Flash had disappeared down the hallway. Since social rules can't deal with this kind of trash, then physical rules will solve it. Just as well. Having just gained 110 points of combat power, the surging chi inside him was looking for a place to vent. This human punching bag delivered right to his door. Wouldn't it be a waste not to use him? Let's go, Gwen. Gilda naturally withdrew his hand and put it into his pocket. Chapter 4: Binding Felicia Hardy. The cafeteria at Empire State University has always been a breeding ground for hormones and gossip. Especially during the lunch rush, the cacophony of voices is even noisier than the New York City subway. However, the moment Gilda stepped into the cafeteria with Gwen, the previously rowdy space fell into a brief, eerie silence. Immediately after, whispers began to boil over like a pot of exploding water. Oh my God, who is that handsome guy? What kind of divine looks are those? That's Johnny Gilda. I heard he made quite a splash in Professor Connor's class this morning. Is that Captain Stacy's daughter next to him? Damn, I'm so jealous of her. Countless gazes focused on the two of them like searchlights. To be precise, they were focused on Gilda. That 1.9-meter tall, upright figure, paired with a face as perfect as an ancient Greek sculpture. Among this group of college students still struggling with acne, it was practically a dimensional strike. Standing out from the crowd. No. It was like a phoenix falling into a nest of common chickens. Gwen carried her tray, walking beside Gilda. Although she was long used to being watched, this feeling of being the center of attention today still made her feel a bit, well, how should she put it? Both proud and inexplicably nervous. Especially the looks coming from the girls around them. The greed and jealousy in those eyes were practically overflowing. They looked as if they wanted to pounce and devour Gilda whole. It seems eating with you is a high-risk activity. Gwen found a seat by the window and sat down, teasing him with a touch of helplessness. Just get used to it. Gilda elegantly cut the steak on his plate, a hint of a smile on his lips. After all, the light of a genius can't be hidden, can it? Narcissist. Gwen rolled her eyes at him, but the smile on her face couldn't be suppressed. Just then, a waft of fragrance approached. It wasn't a cheap perfume scent. It was a unique, wild aroma, a mix of leather and roses. Mind if I share the table, you two biology geniuses? A lazy, slightly husky, magnetic voice sounded above their heads. Gilda looked up. What met his eyes was a head of iconic platinum blonde hair, casually draped over her shoulders. It was a strikingly beautiful and aggressive face. Cat-like eyes, lips red as flame. And those proud curves that even a loose hoodie couldn't hide. Felicia Hardy, the future Black Cat. The most famous master thief in the Marvel Universe and one of Spider-Man's most complicated confidants. But for now, this wild little kitten seemed to have set her sights on a new prey. Felicia Hardy, Art Department. Felicia didn't wait for their consent. She boldly pulled out a chair and sat down opposite Gilda. Her seductive eyes stared straight at Gilda, as if trying to see through him. I noticed you at the school gate, classmate Gilda. Felicia rested her chin on one hand, her fingertip lightly tracing her lower lip in an incredibly alluring motion. Your bone structure is truly perfect. Our art department is currently preparing a themed exhibition on the Greek gods. I've been looking for the Apollo in my heart. As she spoke, she leaned forward slightly, revealing a breathtaking flash of white skin at her collar. Her tone carried a faint, unmistakable hint. Although our majors are different, art and biology are connected to some extent, right? For example, both require a deep understanding of human anatomy. Hiss. This pace is getting a bit fast. Next to him, Gwen's hand gripping the fork tightened instantly. As a top student, how could she not understand this level of innuendo? She might as well have written, "want to hook up" on her face. Classmate Hardy. Gwen cleared her throat. A polite but awkward smile hung on her face. However, she subconsciously leaned closer to Gilda. It was a clear declaration of ownership. Johnny's current research load is very heavy, he probably doesn't have time to be a model. Is that so? That's a pity. Felicia didn't seem to care about Gwen's hostility, instead she smiled even more happily. She took out her phone and held it directly in front of Gilda. But surely there's no problem with exchanging contact info. What if you find yourself interested in art one day, or want to find a place to relax together? Looking at the phone presented to him, Gilda thought to himself, wow. Is this the Black Cat? Spicy enough, direct enough. He liked it. Ding, detected classic high-quality Marvel female, Felicia Hardy. Target identity, future Black Cat Art Department belle with top-tier thief talent and combat abilities. Detected target actively requesting to establish a connection, bind. Did he even need to ask? Only a fool would refuse a benefit delivered to his door. Of course, it's my honor to sacrifice myself for art. Gilda smiled slightly and took out his phone to scan. Ding, binding successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the initial binding reward, Bukujutsu. Skill description, a secret technique of the Crane School from the Dragon Ball world. Defy gravity and soar freely through the sky. Note, combined with the Kai currently mastered by the host, supersonic flight can be achieved. Holy crap. Gilda's hand holding the phone trembled slightly. Bukujutsu. This is a god-tier skill. In the Marvel Universe, very few people can fly. Even among the few who can. Most rely on technology like Iron Man and Falcon, or mutations like Thor and Captain Marvel. But Bukujutsu is free flight, achieved entirely through one's own energy. Flexible, stealthy, and requires no external assistance. Think about it, even someone as strong as Worldbreaker Hulk. He can shatter a continental shelf with 1 foot, but he's just a flea. No matter how high he jumps, he has to land. If he encounters a flying opponent who kites him, he'll still be at a disadvantage. And now he had Bukujutsu, combined with 110 points of combat power. If he later learned how to release Kai blasts, wouldn't he be a human bomber? Gilda forced down the smile on his lips. Alright, I won't disturb your private time anymore. After adding him as a friend, Felicia withdrew her phone with satisfaction and stood up. Before leaving, she intentionally blew a kiss to Gilda. Remember to keep in touch, my Apollo. With that, she walked away, her long legs encased in tight jeans swaying gracefully. She left behind only a waft of fragrance and a black-faced Gwen. "It seems you're very popular in the art department too." Gwen stabbed the mashed potatoes on her plate fiercely with her fork, her tone sour. "That girl seems very enthusiastic." "Indeed." Gilda withdrew his gaze, and seeing Gwen's jealous little look, his heart was practically blooming with joy. What does it mean when a woman is jealous? It means the favorability is in place. However, compared to that kind of wild artistic style, Gilda cut off the most tender piece of beef and naturally placed it on Gwen's plate. His eyes were full of affection. "I still prefer the rigor and elegance of science. Like the future biology PhD sitting next to me." Gwen froze for a moment, looking at the beef on her plate. Then she looked at Gilda's eyes, which seemed to speak. The small bit of frustration in her heart vanished instantly. Her cheeks flushed red all of a sudden. "Smooth talker." Gwen muttered softly and lowered her head to eat the piece of beef. Her heart, however, felt incredibly sweet. Ding, detected Gwen Stacy's pleasant mood, favorability +10. Current favorability, 85, deeply rooted affection. Nice. Gilda felt a secret thrill. Sure enough, without comparison, there is no harm. This assist from Black Cat was simply perfect. The afternoon always passed quickly, especially when sitting next to a beautiful top student. 2 boring history classes were turned into flirting sessions by the two of them. When the bell rang and the clock pointed to 5 p.m., the sunlight outside had begun to turn yellow, dyeing the entire campus in a golden red. Fuse finally over. Gwen closed her textbook and stretched, her beautiful curves fully revealed. But immediately after, her brow furrowed again. "Johnny, later, shall we walk together?" Gwen looked at Gilda with some concern. "I'm worried that Guy Thompson will really bring people to corner you. And Peter, I don't know how he's doing. We'd better leave together. If they really dare to do anything, I'll call the police." Looking at Gwen's ready-for-battle appearance, Gilda felt a warmth in his heart. Although this girl's police plan was likely useless, he appreciated the sentiment. "Don't worry, Gwen," Gilda said nonchalantly while packing his backpack. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. "I said I'd handle it. But since you're worried about Peter, let's go get him first." Gwen nodded obediently. The two of them walked towards Peter Parker at the classroom door. Gilda walked in front with a light step. His hands were in his pockets, his fingertips lightly rubbing together. The chi in his body was like a rushing river, flowing happily through his meridians. Bukyuu Jutsu, plus 110 points of combat power. Flash Thompson. Heh. I hope that guy can take a punch. Don't start crying for your mother after just one hit. Chapter 5. In this school I am the rule. At the classroom door, the flow of people was like a weaving loom. Peter Parker was lowering his head. He tried to shrink himself into that faded, washed-out backpack, like a transparent person trying his best to minimize his presence. A slender and powerful hand suddenly reached out, naturally draping over his shoulder. "Hey Peter, why are you walking so fast?" Gilda's face, the kind that made all the girls in school scream, leaned in with a smile as warm as a spring breeze. Peter's whole body stiffened, and he subconsciously tried to break free. "CL, classmate Gilda, I still have things to do. I have to go first." "Don't be so formal, call me Johnny." The strength in Gilda's hand increased slightly, making it impossible for Peter to move an inch. "Gwen said she was worried about you. I also think that as Professor Connor's prize students and classmates, we should look out for each other, shouldn't we?" After saying that, he turned his head and winked at Gwen beside him. "Right, Gwen." Gwen looked at Gilda's righteous appearance of a big brother protecting his little brother, and a spark of admiration flashed in her beautiful eyes. In this cold New York, how many people would be willing to stand up for a bullied nerd? Not only was Johnny handsome and talented, but he also had such a sense of justice and responsibility. Ding, detected that Gwen Stacy has a high level of recognition for the host's character, favorability +5. Current favorability, 90, will marry no one but you. That sound was truly crisp. Gilda was overjoyed in his heart, but on the surface, he still maintained an air of righteousness. "That's right, Peter. Gwen also stepped forward, her tone firm. Thompson has no sense of boundaries. If the three of us walk together, it will at least give him some pause. Peter looked at the two of them, especially Gwen's concerned gaze. A warm current flowed through his heart, but it was immediately followed by a pang of bitterness. He wasn't stupid. He looked at Gilda's hand resting on his shoulder. Then he looked at the atmosphere between him and Gwen, where a third person could hardly fit in. Right now, he felt exactly like those third-wheel supporting characters in movies who only exist to highlight the protagonist's aura. Okay, thank you guys. Peter finally lowered his head and compromised. The three of them walked side by side toward the school gate. The setting sun stretched their shadows very long. Actually, regarding the cross-species genetic decay rate the professor mentioned this morning, I thought about it later. Gilda didn't let the atmosphere go cold, instead casually throwing out an academic topic. If we introduce radioactive isotopes for labeling, we might be able to detect the critical point of rejection reactions earlier. As soon as he heard an academic question, Peter's eyes instantly lit up, and his original self-consciousness was thrown to the back of his mind. Yes, I think so too. I actually saw a similar paper in an Osborne public journal if it could be combined with. Peter was just about to eloquently display his talent. Combined with Richard Parker's decay rate formula from back then, right? Gilda interrupted him with a smile, directly stating the core of what Peter wanted to say. Unfortunately, that formula is missing a key constant, which is the so-called experimental subject serum. Peter's mouth hung open, the words he was about to say were forced back into his throat. This was a total intellectual smackdown. How did he even know about this? That was a conjecture found only in the manuscripts my father left behind. Beside them, Gwen looked at the eloquently speaking Gilda, the admiration in her eyes almost impossible to hide. Johnny, you know so much, it feels like you know exactly what Peter is thinking. I know a little, just a little. Gilda waved his hand modestly, but he was secretly laughing inside. Sorry, Peter, for the sake of my favorability with Gwen. Your highlight moments are all being taken by me, Gilda. Guard against fire, theft, and Peter, this kind of wall climbing must be nipped in the bud. Just as the three of them were about to walk out of the school gate, the originally bustling crowd suddenly parted to both sides, like Moses parting the sea. Several big guys wearing varsity jackets and chewing gum blocked their path in a fan-shaped formation. The leader was none other than Flash Thompson. He leaned against the iconic stone pillar at the school gate, spinning a football in his hand. A cruel smirk was plastered on his face. Looky here, who is this? Flash straightened up and approached with 5 or 6 teammates surrounding them. Our new school hunk and his little sidekick. What, haven't been weaned yet? Do you need the beautiful Stacy to escort you home? Seeing this, the surrounding students picked up their pace and slipped away, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Thompson. Gwen suddenly took a step forward, blocking the two of them like a protective mother lion. This is the school gate, there are surveillance cameras and security guards everywhere. If you dare to do anything reckless, I'll call the police station right now, I mean it. As she spoke, she actually pulled out her phone. However, Flash wasn't flustered at all, even letting out a frivolous whistle. Relax, beautiful. Flash raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the mockery in his eyes didn't diminish at all. We are civilized people, we just want to invite these two gentlemen to that alley over there to discuss football tactics. After all, classmate Gilda said this morning he wanted to perform orthopedic surgery on me. I'm a very studious person and can't wait to ask for advice. Before his voice finished, the teammates behind him moved instantly. They didn't lay a hand on Gwen, but instead used their physical advantage like a wall of flesh. They forcibly separated Gwen from Gilda and Peter. What are you doing? Move. Gwen became anxious, pushing hard against the big guys in front of her. But how could her strength compare to these athletic hulks? Hey, you two, this way please. Flash grabbed Peter by the neck and squeezed hard. Peter's face instantly turned red. His other hand tried to grab Gilda's collar. Gilda shifted slightly, unobtrusively dodging that hand filled with the smell of sweat. He didn't resist, even straightening his cuffs, that calm smile still on his face. Since classmate Flash is so studious, I certainly won't be stingy with my guidance. Gilda turned to look at the anxious Gwen, giving her a reassuring look. Wait for me here for 5 minutes, Gwen. I'm going to give them a lesson, I'll be back soon. After saying that, he even took the initiative to step forward. He walked toward the famous, brawling Holy Land next to the school. A dead-end alley filled with graffiti and trash cans. Smart move. Flash snorted coldly and dragged Peter along. Watching their figures disappear into the alley entrance, Gwen stomped her feet in anxiety, but her view was firmly blocked by the two teammates left behind. In the dark alley, the air was thick with the smell of rotting trash and urine. This was the most authentic smell of New York. Flash Thompson slammed Peter against the wall with a muffled thud. Cough, cough, cough. Peter clutched his chest, sliding down the wall and gasping for air. Tusk, 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 look at you two. Flash crossed his arms, looking down at the two of them. The lackeys behind him blocked the exit, letting out malicious laughs. Sticking together even after school, people would think you're a couple if they didn't know better. The thing I hate most in this life is a sissy without balls. Flash spat on the ground, his gaze becoming fierce. In this school I am the rule. Parker, since you found a new backer, I'll teach you a good lesson on behalf of society about what it means to face reality. After saying that, Flash didn't even bother to look at Gilda. In his eyes, this pretty boy was only good with his mouth. He'd probably wet his pants when things actually got physical. He'd start by dealing with the soft target Parker to liven things up. Hold him down. Two lackeys immediately stepped forward, pinning Peter's arms on both sides. No, wait. Peter struggled in terror, but it was in vain. Thud. Flash delivered a simple, heavy punch that landed solidly on Peter's abdomen. Ahe. Peter doubled over like a shrimp, bile nearly coming up. The intense pain made him unable to even scream, only letting out painful, wheezing sounds. Stop it, you're breaking the law. Gwen's scream came from the alley entrance, but she was quickly pushed back by the guard. Refreshing. Flash shook his hand, a twisted sense of satisfaction on his face. He turned around, aiming his violent eyes at Gilda, who had been standing by watching the show. Gilda leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. He wasn't angry because Peter was hit, nor was he afraid of the impending violence. He almost felt like laughing. This was it. This kind of child's play fight deserved to be called violence. The chi within his body was slowly circulating. His combat power of 110 made the world in his eyes slow down. Hey, pretty boy. Flash walked up to Gilda, smirking as he cracked his knuckles with a series of pops. Scared stiff. Kneel down now and call me daddy, and I might consider not hitting your face. After all, if this face gets ruined, how are you going to seduce rich women in the future? Gilda sighed and extended a finger, lightly picking his ear. I say, are your villain lines all bought wholesale? No originality at all. I gave you a chance, Thompson. Unfortunately, you didn't cherish it. Hearing this, Thompson flew into a rage. You're asking for it. Flash roared, swinging the same fist that had just hit Peter, aiming to smash it into Gilda's nose. However, just as he was about to strike, boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted on the next street without any warning. Immediately following were ear-piercing alarms and the screams of the crowd. The ground shook violently, and the trash cans in the alley were knocked over. Flash was startled by the sudden explosion, his movements halting abruptly as he looked toward the source of the blast in terror. Everyone was stunned. Even Gilda couldn't help but look over. Chapter 6. Satisfied with my craft. The world outside the alley was already in a state of utter chaos. Screams, sirens, and the roar of heavy objects crashing into the ground echoed from all directions. At the entrance of the bank on the main street outside the alley, bulletproof glass was shattered all over the floor. Roars. Accompanied by a roar, a massive figure crashed through the thick walls of the bank and charged onto the street. It was a monster nearly 2.5 meters tall. He was covered head to toe in a gray combat suit as thick and rough as rhino hide. Atop his head sat a massive, singular horn. The two heavy metal safes he carried in his hands looked as light as plastic bags. Rhino Alexei Sitsevich. Kingpin's #1 bulldozer. Haha, New York police, just a bunch of monkeys in uniforms. Rhino laughed maniacally, facing the first police car that came screaming toward him. He didn't retreat but instead charged forward. Lowering his head, he aimed his horn at the front of the car and slammed into it like an out-of-control tank. Boom! The police car was flipped directly into the air, rolling twice. It crashed heavily onto a roadside fire hydrant, sending a geyser of water shooting into the sky. Fire, fire, stop him! Screeching brakes sounded one after another as over a dozen police cars quickly formed a blockade. A middle-aged police officer with graying hair and a resolute face pushed open his car door and stepped out, shouting commands through a megaphone. It was none other than the New York City Police Department Director, George Stacy. Gwen's father. At this moment, Chief George was drenched in sweat, his expression grave to the extreme. Bang, 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 bang. Intense gunfire erupted instantly. Countless bullets poured onto Rhino like rain. However, clang, clang. Those 9 bullets, which were more than capable of piercing a human body, struck Rhino's skin, only to send sparks flying before bouncing off harmlessly. Not even the skin was grazed. Damn it, is this what those supervillains are like? We need heavy weaponry, where's SWAT? Chief George slammed his fist against the car door. Faced with such inhuman power, ordinary police seemed utterly helpless. Rhino patted his chest, a cruel smile spreading across his face. This is your welcoming ceremony, too weak. He charged again, smashing right through the police line. Looks like the New York police are having a team-building exercise today, then come and play with me. Meanwhile, inside the dark alleyway, the explosions and chaos outside only caused Flash Thompson to daze for a moment. He turned back, looking at the person still leaning against the wall. Gilda, with his hands in his pockets and an air of nonchalance. That indifferent, almost theatrical expression deeply stung Flash's fragile ego. A sense of shame from being belittled instantly outweighed his surprise at the distant explosions. What are you looking at? Flash spat viciously. Whatever is blowing up outside is the police's problem, it has nothing to do with us. Besides, a sinister smile appeared on Flash's face as he pointed toward the alley entrance. With things this messy outside, those police are already overwhelmed. Even if that beauty calls the police now, do you think anyone would come to help a pathetic worm like you? This was the evil of human nature. Under a breakdown of order, perpetrators often feel safer and more uninhibited. Thompson, are you crazy? Gwen's eyes reddened with anxiety. Her blonde hair looked a bit disheveled from her distress, which only added a touch of tragic beauty. She stared intently into the alley and shouted loudly. Johnny, forget about your pride, just run or just back down. She was truly afraid. Although Johnny was tall, Flash was the star quarterback of the school football team. His explosiveness and physique were not something an ordinary student could compare to. She didn't want to see any scars on Johnny's perfect face. Even more, she didn't want to see this talented boy's pride broken because of her. This intense feeling of heartache and desire to protect. Even Gwen herself didn't realize that it had already far exceeded the scope of being just classmates. Back down. Flash gave a cruel laugh and cracked his neck. Too late. Gwen, keep your eyes wide open and watch. Watch how I turn the God in your heart into a pile of trash that only knows how to beg for mercy. From now on, no girl will ever scream for this pretty boy's face again. Before the words had even finished, Flash let out a roar, lunging like a predatory bear. Using the momentum of his run, his fist, the size of a sandbag, whistled through the air, aimed straight at Gilda's face. If this punch landed, a shattered nose would be the least of his worries. No! Gwen let out a terrified scream and instinctively covered her eyes with both hands. Peeking through her fingers, she closed her eyes in despair, not daring to watch the bloody scene that was about to unfold. However, 1 second, 2 seconds. The expected thud of a fist hitting flesh did not come. Instead, snap. A soft sound. like catching a tossed tennis ball. Immediately followed by "Ow-egged." A pig-slaughtering scream abruptly exploded in the narrow alley. Gwen's delicate body trembled. This voice, why didn't it sound like Johnny's? She tremblingly moved her fingers and opened her eyes. In the next second, her beautiful eyes instantly widened, and her cherry-like mouth hung slightly open. She was frozen in place. Inside the alley, Gilda still maintained his posture of leaning against the wall. He hadn't even taken his hand out of his left pocket. His right hand was raised effortlessly. 5 slender fingers were tightly gripping Flash's massive fist. No matter how much Flash strained, his face turning red and his neck bulging. That fist was like it had been welded into Gilda's hand, completely motionless. Is that it? Gilda tilted his head slightly, looking at the terrified and sweat-drenched Flash in front of him. A playful smile curled at the corner of his mouth. Boring. No sooner had he spoken. Gilda's right wrist gave a seemingly casual flip and twisted downward. Crack. The crisp sound of bone dislocating was exceptionally jarring in the quiet alley. Ow! Flash's entire body twisted and he fell to his knees uncontrollably, following the direction of Gilda's force. The arm he had intended to use for violence was now bent outward at a bizarre angle. The intense pain caused his entire face to contort into a shade of red, and snot and tears instantly gushed out. Let go, it's broken, it's going to break. Flash knelt on the ground, frantically slapping the floor, his previous arrogance completely gone. Boss. The lackeys blocking the entrance finally reacted, seeing their boss neutralized in a single move. They looked at each other and, relying on their numbers, began to charge forward while cursing. Damn it, you dare touch our boss. Kill him. Facing the charging group, Gilda didn't even lift an eyelid. He simply applied a bit more pressure to the hand holding Flash's fist. Ariag, don't come over, stay the hell away. Flash let out a shrill howl, feeling as if his wrist was about to be crushed. He roared at his subordinates in terror. Back off, everyone, back the hell off, my hand is going to be ruined. The lackeys screeched to a halt, looking at each other, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Gilda looked down at the kneeling Flash from above. His gaze was cold, devoid of any warmth. I told you, I'm here to perform orthopedic surgery on you. You see, I'm a man of my word. So satisfied with my craft. Chapter 7. One cannot be too much of a saint. Ow, let go, damn it. In the dead-end alley, Flash Thompson's screams were more piercing than a slaughtered pig's. His usually arrogant face was now twisted like a crumpled rag. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. The intense pain from his wrist made him feel like his bones were about to be crushed the next second. That kind of strength was simply not human. Let go. Gilda raised an eyebrow slightly. Not only did he not let go, but his fingers tightened slightly. Crack. The sound of bones grinding echoed again. Elia, you bastard, do you know who I am? The agonizing pain made Flash lose his mind. Kneeling on the ground, even as he convulsed with pain, he continued to spew threats. My dad is a school board member. If you dare cripple me, I swear I'll make sure you can't survive in New York. I'll find someone to kill you, kill your whole family. Hearing these words, Gilda felt like laughing. Kill me and my whole family. Gilda chuckled. Thompson, it seems you haven't grasped the situation yet. Right now, your hand is in my hand, and your life is in my hand too. Since you've put it that way, if I let you go now, wouldn't I just be waiting for you to come back for revenge? What do you want to do? Flash panicked. Don't be nervous, just a little lesson to help you remember. Before he finished speaking, Gilda's left hand whipped out of his pocket, turning into an uppercut. Bang! A dull thud. Gilda's fist slammed solidly into Flash's abdomen. He controlled his strength for this punch. He used maybe about 5% of his 110 combat power. After all, if he used even a little more force, this guy's stomach might have been punched straight through. Spilling guts everywhere would be too disgusting. It would scare the beautiful little Gwen nearby. But even so, cough. Flash's eyes bulged instantly, and his entire face turned deep purple. He opened his mouth wide, gasping for air, but found he couldn't draw a single breath into his lungs. Stomach acid mixed with the pizza he had for lunch sprayed out uncontrollably. He curled up on the ground, unable to even let out a scream. This one punch had completely broken him. Gilda stepped back in disgust, avoiding the mess on the ground. He turned his head to look at Peter Parker, who was huddled in the corner, a sunny smile returning to his face. "Peter, this punch was for you. How was it satisfying?" Peter Parker was leaning against the wall, looking at the agonizing flash on the ground, his expression incredibly complex. He hadn't expected Gilda to be so ruthless. That decisiveness and ruthlessness were a complete contrast to his gentle image. But it was undeniable, seeing the bully who usually picked on him lying on the ground like a dead dog. Peter felt an unprecedented surge of satisfaction in his heart. But soon, the Uncle Ben-style moral shackles etched into his bones resurfaced. Johnny. Peter swallowed hard and stammered. That's enough, right? Even though he's a jerk who bullies people, we can't become like him. If we break him, we'll get into big trouble. Violence doesn't solve problems, Hearing this, Gilda couldn't help but roll his eyes. As expected, this was Peter Parker. Even if he was ground into the dirt, even if he gained superpowers, that almost pedantic kindness in his bones still wouldn't change. This was also what Gilda disliked most about him. Commonly known as a saint. In this dog-eat-dog Marvel universe, such a personality does nothing but satisfy one's own ego while getting everyone nearby killed. "Peter, you're wrong." Before Gilda could even open his mouth to argue, Gwen, who had been standing at the alley entrance, suddenly walked over. She looked at Flash on the ground. There was no sympathy in her eyes, only a hint of satisfaction. Violence indeed can't solve all problems, but it can solve the people creating the problems. For someone like Thompson, reasoning is useless. Only by making him feel pain and fear will he learn to respect others. After speaking, Gwen turned to look at Gilda, her beautiful eyes sparkling with admiration. "Johnny, you did the right thing. Scum like this deserves a good lesson." Ding detected Gwen Stacy's approval of the host's violent behavior. Values are highly aligned, favorability +1. Current favorability, 91 will only marry you. It's already 91. Gilda looked at Gwen with some surprise. Who would have thought? This version of Gwen actually suits his taste so well. As expected of a police chief's daughter, violent blood truly flows in her veins. She's no little white rabbit, she's clearly a leopard cub that hasn't grown up yet. Love it, love it. Since my wife has spoken, I have to reward this pig with another punch. Did you hear that, Peter? Gilda shrugged, looking at Peter's dazed expression with a slight smirk. This is why Gwen is a goddess while you can only watch from the sidelines. Sometimes a man needs to be a bit ruthless. With that, Gilda raised his hand again. He slammed down another punch on Flash, who hadn't even recovered yet. Bang! This punch landed on Flash's face. Several bloody teeth flew right out. Flash didn't even grunt, his eyes rolled back and he passed out cold. The world went quiet. Gilda let go, casually tossing Flash's deformed hand onto the ground. All right, next. Gilda looked up, his gaze sweeping over the varsity team, lackeys blocking the alley entrance. His gaze was cold, as if looking at a flock of lambs waiting for slaughter. What, do you guys want to have surgery too? The lackeys were already scared witless by Gilda's brutal methods. Though they usually acted tough with Flash, they were ultimately just a bunch of students who hadn't seen much of the world. Even in their usual fights, it was mostly pushing and shoving, or a group ganging up on someone who didn't dare fight back. When had they ever seen a scene like this? One punch makes a person vomit acid, and two punches knock out teeth and cause a blackout. Is this even a fight? And no. They glanced at each other, seeing the fear in one another's eyes. Just as they were hesitating whether to turn and run, one of them, who looked a bit sturdier, suddenly gritted his teeth and pulled a switchblade from his jacket. What are you afraid of? There's only one of him. Let's go together. If something happens to the boss, his family won't let us off. Get him. With someone leading the way, the rest seem to find their backbone. In moments of extreme fear, people often erupt with a blind ferocity. Die! The guy with the knife roared and charged first, the blade aimed straight at Gilda's abdomen. Seeing this, Gwen's face instantly turned pale. Johnny, watch out, he has a knife. Meanwhile, on the street outside the alley, a black SWAT armored vehicle flew through the air. After tumbling a dozen times in the air, it crashed into a shop across from the alley with a loud boom. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Immediately after, a massive gray figure appeared in everyone's sight, accompanied by a cloud of dust and rubble. Rhino. By now, he had completely entered a state of frenzy. His body was covered in bullet marks, but those attacks were like tickles to him, only serving to fuel his ferocity. Get out of the way, everyone, get out of my way. Rhino roared, casually flipping over a taxi blocking the middle of the road. His small, bloodshot eyes darted around. The police firepower was too intense, especially the helicopters circling in the sky and the heavy machine guns set up in the distance. Even if they couldn't pierce his armor, it still hurt like hell. He needed cover or an escape route. Soon, his gaze locked onto the entrance of this alley. The alley was narrow and deep, and it connected to a complex sewer system. As long as he got inside, those heavy weapons would become useless. Haha, luck is on my side. Rhino laughed maniacally, lowering his head and aiming his massive horn at the alley entrance. His massive feet stomped the ground, causing the asphalt to explode instantly. He was like a train at full speed, charging toward the alley with matchless momentum. Directly across from the alley, behind the defensive line established by the police, Chief Gwen Stacy, having just directed a volley of fire, was about to order the use of armor-piercing rounds. He instinctively looked in the direction of Rhino's charge. With that one look, his heart clenched and his pupils dilated to the limit. At the entrance of that alley, amidst the thick dust and chaos, he saw that familiar flash of gold. It was his precious daughter, whose forehead he kissed every day before leaving home. Gwen. Right now, because of the earlier vibration, Gwen was leaning against the wall, standing right at the outermost edge of the alley, right in the middle of Rhino's charging path. No, Gwen. Chief George let out a heart-wrenching roar. He tried to rush out desperately, but was held back firmly by the officers around him. Director, it's dangerous. Chapter 8, Successfully Conquering the First Marvel Goddess. Rumbled. A dull, massive roar approached. The ground began to tremble violently, and ripples spread across the puddles in the alley. Wow, what is that sound? The varsity team lackeys, who were originally holding switchblades and preparing to charge at Johnny Gilda for a desperate fight, now froze in place. They turned their heads in terror, looking toward the entrance of the alley. The next second, everyone's pupils snapped to the size of needle points. In the dust at the alley's entrance, a massive gray figure as large as a small mountain was lowering its head. That single horn, powerful enough to pierce an armored vehicle, was charging fiercely toward the alley entrance. Rhino. The overwhelming pressure coming at them was suffocating. Oh my god, a monster. Run, run now. The lackey who had just been shouting about killing Johnny was now so scared he couldn't even hold his knife steady. With a clang, it fell to the ground. The boy who had been responsible for blocking the alley entrance to restrict Gwen's movement let out a strange cry. He scrambled and crawled toward the other end of the alley as fast as he could. As for Gwen, who the hell cared about anyone else? Human nature was fully exposed at this moment. Every man for himself when disaster strikes. Only Gwen was left, standing all alone at the outermost edge of the alley entrance. She watched the monster getting closer and closer. She watched that horn glinting with a cold light. Boundless fear flooded over her like a tide. Even though she was the daughter of the police chief and was usually very assertive, at the end of the day, she was just an 18-year-old girl who hadn't even left school yet. Facing such a non-human monster, her legs felt like they were filled with lead, unable to move an inch. Am I going to die? Gwen's mind went completely blank, watching Rhino's hideous face rapidly enlarge in her vision. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. She could even see the rough texture on Rhino's armor and those eyes filled with bloodshot madness. In despair, she closed her eyes. At this critical juncture, whoosh! The sound of something cutting through the air suddenly rang out. Immediately after, Gwen felt her waist being suddenly grabbed by a powerful, large hand. That palm was broad and warm, carrying a strength that was incredibly reassuring. Then a massive pulling force came. Her body was instantly lifted into the air. The world spun around her. Boom! Just as her feet left the ground, Rhino's massive body brushed past her hair and slammed violently into the alley. A gale whistled and debris flew everywhere. But Gwen didn't feel the slightest bit of pain, because her entire being was held tightly within a firm embrace. It was an intoxicating scent of masculine hormones. Gwen tremulously opened her eyes. What met her eyes was Johnny's profile, so close and breathtakingly handsome. At this moment, his eyes were cold and sharp. Holding her with one arm, he landed steadily to the side of the alley entrance. "Are you okay?" Johnny looked down at the girl in his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "It seems I've saved you once. Should you consider giving yourself to me in gratitude?" Gwen's face turned beet red in an instant, all the way to her ears. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest, so fast it felt like it would jump out. The relief of surviving a disaster mixed with the sweetness of being protected by the person she liked. It made her legs go weak and she slumped into Johnny's arms, not wanting to get up at all. Ding! Detected that the host has completed the Hero Saves the Beauty achievement. Gwen Stacy is profoundly shocked and moved. Affection +9. Current affection 100, unwavering until death. Congratulations to the host, successfully conquered the first Marvel goddess. Obtained first clear rewards, Kaioken X2 Trial Card X1 Afterimage Fist. Kaioken Skill Description, a secret forbidden technique of King Kai. It burns blood and chi to forcibly double all attributes. An overdraft god-tier skill for explosive desperation, killing enemies of a higher level and taking out the enemy at the cost of one's own health. Afterimage Fist Skill Description, a movement technique of the Turtle Hermit School. It uses afterimages to deceive the eyes, making the opponent attack the air wildly. An essential god-tier skill for teasing opponents, turning the tables with low health and showing off maneuvers. Next, please work hard to complete the interaction achievements. Hearing the system's prompt in his mind, a sharp light flashed in Johnny's eyes. Nice. This wave was a huge profit. Kaioken. That was Son Goku's signature technique from Dragon Ball. Although it was only X2 and only a trial card. One must know that the effect of Kaioken is to multiply all of the user's attributes. Strength, speed, defense, destructive power, all doubled. Johnny's current base combat power was 110. After activating X2 Kaioken, that would be 220. What does a combat power of 220 mean? In the early days of Dragon Ball, a powerhouse like Tain Shinhan, who could shatter a martial arts stage with one hit, only had a combat power around that number. Placed on Marvel's Earth. That was definitely a top-tier existence. Captain America, Black Panther, Spider-Man. In front of Johnny with Kaioken activated, they would be nothing. Even Wolverine with his super healing factor, or Venom who likes to eat brains. Johnny had the confidence to go head-to-head with them. As for the Afterimage Fist, that was even more practical. Using high-speed movement to create afterimages and confuse the enemy. Whether used for attacking or showing off, it was a god-tier skill. This is in the bag. Johnny tightened his arm around Gwen's waist, feeling the amazing elasticity through his fingertips. He was in a great mood, meanwhile. On the street across from the alley, Chief George Stacy slumped against the police car, gasping for breath. Cold sweat soaked his back. In that moment just now, he really thought he was going to lose his daughter. God bless, God bless. Chief George looked at the young man holding his daughter by the alley entrance. His gaze was incredibly complex. Gratitude, relief, and a hint of the bitterness an old father feels when he sees his precious cabbage being uprooted by a pig. But now was not the time for such thoughts. Quick, everyone, surround the alley. Support team, bring the heavy weapons and follow me. Chief George roared, drawing his sidearm and being the first to rush toward the alley entrance. Inside the alley at this moment, it was simply a living hell. Those varsity team members who were once so arrogant were now like bowling pins scattered everywhere by Rhino's charge. Roars! Rhino didn't care at all whether he was stepping on trash or people. He only wanted to escape. Vda. Flash Thompson, who had been so arrogant just moments ago. Before he could even recover from the excruciating pain of his broken hand, he tried to struggle to his feet. He was clipped by the edge of Rhino's massive foot. He was sent flying, hitting the wall with a thud. Now look at him. Not only was his hand broken, but several ribs were likely broken as well. He passed out immediately, his fate unknown. As for Peter Parker, at the moment Rhino charged in, driven by survival instinct, Peter made a twisting motion. He slid along the wall, barely avoiding Rhino's direct impact. My God! Peter crouched behind a dumpster, watching the monster frantically destroying the walls, trying to find an exit. Then looking at Johnny, who had rescued Gwen like a god descending to Earth. The disappointment and inferiority in his eyes grew even heavier. The gap between him and Johnny. Was it really this large? The alley entrance. Chief George arrived with a team of SWAT officers armed with riot shields and automatic rifles. Gwen, are you all right? George rushed up, looking his daughter up and down, his voice trembling. Dad, I'm fine. Gwen stepped out of Johnny's embrace. Though her legs were still a bit weak, she tried her best to stand straight. She held Johnny's hand tightly, her eyes full of pride. Johnny saved me. George glanced at Johnny and nodded. Young man, thank you. It's too dangerous here, leave the rest to the police. Take Gwen away from here now. George's tone left no room for argument. He turned around, looking at Rhino, who was trying to lift a manhole cover in the alley, a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes. Everyone prepare tear gas, we cannot let him escape. However, escape. A light chuckle sounded behind George. Johnny let go of Gwen's hand and patted her shoulder gently, signaling her to back up. Then, he unhurriedly rolled up his sleeves, revealing his lean, well-defined forearms. Mr. Chief. Johnny looked at George, then at the big guy deep in the alley who was destroying public property. A confident smile appeared on his face. With all due respect, with those fire sticks you're holding, you won't be able to keep that big guy here. The armor on him, even an RPG might not pierce it. George frowned. Young man, what do you mean by that? Also, this is no time to play hero, that's a supervillain. I know. Johnny shrugged. Of course he knew it was a supervillain. But he knew even better. This was the perfect stage to show off his strength in front of his future father-in-law. And even more, it was the perfect moment to completely solidify his image in front of Gwen. This way, he could lay the groundwork for the future interactions between him and Gwen. Besides, that Rhino guy just had a very punchable face. As a law-abiding good citizen of America and a future flower of Empire State University, how can I just stand by and watch a criminal get away scot-free? Johnny wagged his index finger at George and the stunned group of police officers. This kind of heavy lifting, you'd better leave it to me. Having said that, under everyone's shocked gazes, Johnny put his hands in his pockets, taking a leisurely stroll-like pace. Step by step, he walked into that dark alley filled with danger and violence. His silhouette looked incredibly cool. Chapter 9, Guess which one is the real body? That boy, what is he doing? Several SWAT officers had just finished setting up their riot shields. They watched the back of the figure walking leisurely toward the depths of the alley with one hand in his pocket. Their eyes were almost popping out of their sockets. That was the Rhino. A monster that could flip a SWAT armored vehicle like a toy. Who did this person think he was? Captain America. Quick, pull him back, don't let him go to his death. Chief George snapped out of it and roared, about to rush forward. However, just as his hand was about to touch the corner of Johnny Gilda's clothes. Whoosh! A sharp sound of breaking air exploded from overhead without warning. Immediately after, A wild wind rose, blowing so hard that everyone couldn't keep their eyes open. A huge shadow instantly enveloped the entire alley entrance. Everyone subconsciously looked up. Between the narrow gaps of the tall buildings on both sides, a green freak with wings on his back was circling in midair. That pair of huge mechanical steel wings had a wingspan 10 meters wide. The Vulture, one of the founding members of the Sinister Six. That's another supervillain. George Stacy's face turned pale instantly. The rhino alone had already given them a massive headache. And now another one that could fly had arrived. Jai, Alexei, you piece of trash, can't you even handle a bunch of garbage in uniforms? In midair, the vulture let out a sharp, owl-like cackle. He swung his wings violently. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Dozens of steel feathers, sharp as knives, poured down like a torrential rain of pear blossoms. Take cover quickly. The police shouted in terror, raising their shields and scattering to hide. Clang, clang, clang. The steel feathers nailed into the ground, walls, and police cars, sending up a series of sparks. Several officers who couldn't dodge in time screamed and fell to the ground, their uniforms stained red with blood. Amidst this torrential rain of steel, only Johnny Gilda. He still stood in the middle of the alley, without moving even half a step. He looked up slightly at the arrogant figure in the sky, a hint of playfulness flashing in his eyes. Vulture, what day is it today? A zoo convention. Johnny, watch your head. In the corner of the alley entrance, Gwen was being protected behind the police. Seeing the sky full of steel feathers heading straight for Johnny Gilda, her heart almost stopped from fear. She wanted to rush out but was held down firmly by the policewoman beside her. However, facing an attack capable of riddling a person like a sieve, Johnny Gilda just casually tilted his body. Shua shua shua. Several steel feathers grazed the edge of his clothes and nailed into the ground, sinking deep into the stone. Yet not even a single strand of his hair was harmed. That kind of composure, that kind of anticipation. It was as if he had seen through all the ballistic trajectories long ago. Ahem. The vulture in midair let out a light sound of surprise, his eyes narrowing behind his mask. Interesting, he could actually dodge, a lucky bug. However, he didn't continue to engage. His task was to provide backup, not to slaughter. Alexei, stop playing, the boss is still waiting for us. The vulture shouted toward the depths of the alley. And at this time, the rhino, who originally only wanted to crawl into the sewers to escape due to the heavy fire suppression from the police. After hearing the vulture's voice, his small, mung bean-like eyes instantly lit up. Backup is here. Air support has arrived. Since I have air superiority, why the hell should I run? Roars. The rhino spun around abruptly. His thick gray armor looked particularly hideous in the dim alley. He abandoned the manhole cover that had been halfway pried open. His eyes, filled with tyranny and killing intent, locked firmly onto Johnny Gilda standing in the middle of the alley. You blind little bug. You still dare to stand in my way, now die for me. The rhino launched a charge once more. This time in the narrow alley, there was no space to dodge. He lowered his head just like that single horn crushing toward Johnny Gilda. The power of this collision. Never mind a body of flesh and blood. Even a main battle tank would be smashed into a pancake by him. It's over. Outside the alley, Chief George closed his eyes in despair. He had seen too many scenes like this. In the face of such absolute power, humans were so fragile. That young man, although he had some skills and some courage, but he was ultimately just a human. Sigh. George sighed heavily, clenching his fists so hard his nails dug deep into his flesh. Young people are just too impulsive, especially in front of women. They always want to play the hero. Unfortunately, the price is too high. Gwen even covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Johnny. Facing the Cernkill strike. A cold smile curled at the corner of Johnny Gilda's mouth. This guy is indeed very strong. At my current level, if I take it head-on, I'll probably turn into a sheet of paper lying on the ground. After all, this guy is much stronger than Spider-Man and stronger than the current him. But who told you that fighting must be head-on? Against a tank like this that has only brute force and no brains, the best way is to make him unable to even catch my exhaust. Just as the rhino's horn was less than half a meter from Johnny Gilda's chest. At the very instant that foul-smelling wind pressure had even messed up Johnny Gilda's hairstyle. Johnny Gilda moved. After image fist. The next second, the rhino felt as if he had crashed into a mass of air. There was no resistance, no physical sensation of a collision. He just passed straight through Johnny Gilda's body. What? The rhino braked violently. Huge inertia caused his feet to plow two deep grooves in the ground until he hit the wall at the end of the alley and stopped. Boom! The wall collapsed and dust flew everywhere. The rhino shook his somewhat dizzy head and turned around angrily. Bastard, where did you hide? However, when he saw the scene before him clearly, he, along with the vulture in the sky and all the police and Gwen outside the alley, were all dumbfounded, completely stunned, in the originally empty alley. At some unknown point, subscribe for more amazing novel audiobooks. Don't forget to like, comment, and share Infinite Novel Audio. More than a dozen Johnny Gildas had actually appeared. They were in various poses. Some had their hands in their pockets, some were crossing their arms with a cold smile, and some were tidying their hair. Each one was lifelike, and each one emitted the same aura. They surrounded the rhino completely. What is this? The vulture almost lost control of his flight apparatus and fell from the sky. He had been in New York for so many years. He had seen mutants, he had seen technology, and he had even seen those who used magic. But this kind of clone technique. Is this freaking ninjutsu? Hey big guy. More than a dozen Johnny Gildas spoke simultaneously, their voices overlapping with a strange echo. Are you looking for me? Guess which one is the real body. There's a prize if you guess right, but if you guess wrong. All the Johnny Gildas revealed a bright smile at the same time. My fists are very painful, you know. Chapter 10, One Punch KO. Roars. Being surrounded by a dozen Gildas was clearly not a pleasant experience. Especially for a single-celled organism like Rhino, whose brain capacity isn't even as large as his biceps. This visual deception was practically more painful than killing him. Fake, they're all fakes. I want to see how long you can hide. Rhino's bloodshot eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. Like a mad bull, he swung his massive arms. He smashed frantically at the nearest afterimages. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The wind from his punches howled. However, every single attack, the Gilda standing there would dissipate the moment the fist touched him. Then, in another corner, a figure with a mocking smile would reform. Oops, a bit slow. Tusk, that punch had good power, too bad it hit thin air. Big guy, are your eyes just for show? A dozen Gildas spoke simultaneously. That surround sound mockery sent Rhino's blood pressure skyrocketing to the brink of exploding. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to tear you to pieces. Rhino roared in impotent rage, smashing the walls on both sides of the alley into a pitted mess, sending debris flying everywhere. Idiot! In the sky, the circling vulture couldn't bear to watch any longer. Though he was also shocked by this bizarre ninjutsu. He ultimately held air superiority and a wide field of vision. Among those dozen flickering figures, he keenly caught a slight, uncoordinated anomaly. Alexei, stop crashing around like a headless fly. Vulture shouted. Simultaneously, the thrusters on his wings adjusted their angle. A mechanical claw lunged toward a figure leaning against the wall on the right side of the alley. That's the real one, 3 o'clock, ram him to death. Hearing his teammate's tip, Rhino's wandering eyes instantly focused. He stared fixedly at the Gilda leaning against the wall, who was looking down at his fingernails. His mouth split into a cruel, wide grin. Found you, little mouse. Without any hesitation, Rhino charged again. This time he held nothing back. The jet ports on the back of his armor even spat out 2 streaks of blue fire. Boost! His entire person slammed toward the real body with a thunderous force. Dive! The terrifying momentum caused the police officers outside the alley who were planning to assist to subconsciously pull their triggers. Bang, 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 bang. Bullets hit Rhino's back, but other than sparking, they couldn't slow him down in the slightest. No. Gwen, being held back firmly by George, closed her eyes in despair. Even Chief George had his heart in his throat at this moment. Even if his feelings toward this kid who had eyes for his daughter were complicated. At this moment, he certainly didn't want to see a young man bursting with a sense of justice turn into a pile of mush. However, just as Rhino's horn was about to pierce Gilda's chest, the Gilda who had been looking down suddenly raised his head. He flashed a row of neat white teeth at the charging behemoth. Wrong guess. That was me from a second ago. What? Rhino's pupils shrank violently. Before his brain could react, the Gilda in front of him vanished. Another afterimage. Damn it, I can't stop. Rhino tried to brake in terror. But at this extreme speed, coupled with the thrusters, his inertia was staggering. Boom! A world-shaking explosion rang out. Rhino's horn, along with his head and half his body, slammed solidly into the thick concrete load-bearing wall. The entire building shook violently, as if a magnitude 5 earthquake had occurred. Dust rose everywhere. Oh, he's stuck, can't get out. From inside the wall came Rhino's muffled and embarrassed roar. That horn he was so proud of was now firmly wedged in the reinforced concrete. No matter how his two thick legs kicked the ground or how hard he pulled, he didn't budge an inch. He looked just like an oversized gray rat with its head caught in a mousetrap. Hey! In the sky, Vulture's mouth twitched violently. Sorry, I misjudged. Ha ha ha. In the alley, the real Gilda manifested behind Rhino. He looked at the Rhino with his butt in the air, struggling to pull his head out. He couldn't help but burst out laughing. Well, this is awkward, isn't it? I mean, why grow a horn for no reason? Are you trying to be a lightning rod? The police officers outside the alley were also stunned. Gwen opened her eyes and saw the scene. Her tense body instantly relaxed. Now's the chance. Chief George was the first to react. His professional training made him immediately bark an order. While he stuck, attack. But Gilda was faster than them. Since you're stuck, don't bother coming out. Ora ora ora. Gilda's figure instantly appeared behind Rhino. His fists fell like raindrops. Bang 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 bang. Every punch carried the terrifying strength of one Captain America's. The muffled thuds were like beating drums, making the eardrums of those nearby ache. However, useless. Ha ha ha, attacks of this level are just like scratching an itch for me. Rhino couldn't get his head out, but his mouth was still tough. This Rhino armor of his was a specially modified high molecular polymer that could even withstand 2 anti-tank missiles. Ordinary physical attacks were simply negligible. Put some back into it, didn't you eat today? Rhino even had the leisure to mock him. Oh really? Gilda stopped his movements and shook his slightly warm wrists. True. This turtle shell was quite hard. Even with a combat power of 110, trying to tear through this thick armor with bare hands would take quite some effort. But who said he had to break the turtle shell? Since you don't like having your itch scratched. Gilda walked to Rhino's side, looking at his head, which was forced to tilt because it was stuck. Specifically at that face which, although protected by a helmet, still had some exposed areas. Then let me perform some plastic surgery on you. A smug, fierce grin curled at the corner of Gilda's mouth. He crouched slightly, powered up from his waist, and delivered a precise and vicious uppercut. From bottom to top at an extremely tricky angle. He slammed directly into Rhino's chin, which was exposed outside the helmet. This punch condensed all of Gilda's chi. Sure you can. Bang. Crack. Rhino's chin shattered instantly. The massive impact was transmitted directly into his brain. Rhino, who had been shouting just a moment ago, fell silent instantly. His eyes rolled back, showing a large area of white. Following that, the massive body twitched violently. Then, as if his bones had been removed, he slumped down limply. If his horn hadn't been stuck in the wall, he would have likely slid all the way to the ground. One punch. KO. Phew. Gilda blew on his fist and straightened his slightly messy collar. He turned around and flashed a bright smile at George and Gwen outside the alley. Done. At this moment, everyone stood with their mouths agape, looking at the boy standing beside the giant beast. It was as if they were looking at an alien. My God! The gun in Chief George's hand was almost trembling. That was Rhino, a monster the entire police department was helpless against. And he was knocked out with a single punch. Just who on earth was this young man? Gwen clutched her chest, and the look in her eyes as she watched Gilda was practically overflowing with love. So cool. So strong. This was the man Gwen Stacy, had set her eyes on. Damn it, damn it, damn it. In the sky, Vulture saw this and was so angry he nearly crushed his control stick. Useless. All of them are useless. Defeated in a single encounter, how was he supposed to explain this to the boss? In that case, then none of you shall live. Since I'm in the sky, this is my home turf. Eat some bombs, you insects. Vulture suddenly pulled up, and the mounting bays under his wings opened. A dozen pumpkin-sized microbombs dropped like dumplings. They were tossed indiscriminately toward the police gathered at the alley entrance and Gilda. Not good bombs. Chief George's face changed drastically. Scatter, scatter quickly. He grabbed Gwen beside him and lunged desperately toward a distant cover. Boom, 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 boom. A continuous series of explosions rang out. Flames shot into the sky and heat waves rolled out. Although the police reacted quickly, many were still sent flying by the airwaves. Ha ha ha, run, scream. Vulture circled in the smoke-filled air, letting out a triumphant, mad laugh. This is air superiority. As long as I'm in the sky, you ants on the ground can only take a beating. Looking at the wretched crowd below, Vulture's sense of superiority was greatly satisfied. He turned around and locked his gaze on Gilda standing in the alley. Kid, you're pretty good at fighting, aren't you? Too bad you can't fly. Now it's your turn. Vulture grinned savagely, and the thrusters on his wings opened to full power. He didn't dive down for close combat, instead he hovered 10 meters in the air. He prepared to use all his remaining firepower to give this kid who ruined his plans a saturation strike. However, just as he was about to press the fire button, he saw the boy. The boy standing in the dust slowly raised his head. Are those your last words? Gilda spoke indifferently. What? Vulture was taken aback. Following that, he saw a scene he would never be able to understand for the rest of his life, one sufficient to collapse his worldview. He saw that Gilda didn't make any move to jump. Around his body, a faint layer of white chi suddenly flickered. Then, his feet slowly, defying all physical common sense, left the ground. 1 meter, 2 meters, 10 meters, no jet devices, no wings, not even any point of leverage. He just stood there with his hands behind his back. Straight at a constant speed and without any rhyme or reason, he flew up. What? The savage grin on Vulture's face froze instantly, replaced by an extreme horror as if he had seen a ghost. His eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets, and his mouth hung open wide enough to fit a light bulb. Flying. How is this possible? No wings, no thrusters, not even any mutation characteristics. This isn't scientific. Vulture's brain was a mess. And it wasn't just him. On the ground, Chief George, who had just peeked out from behind cover. Looking at that figure suspended in midair, the walkie-talkie in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. He can fly. Gwen covered her mouth, her beautiful eyes filled with disbelief and shock. Johnny is also a superhero. Even in the corner of the alley. Flash Thompson, who had just slowly woken up from his faint and was preparing to crawl away in the chaos, looked up and saw the man who had given him a psychological shadow now floating in the sky. I must still be dreaming. Flash's eyes rolled back, and he very decisively fainted again. Chapter 11, Chief George's mood is truly complicated. 10 meters in the air. Vulture's face, hidden beneath his flight mask, was now contorted with extreme shock. He stared fixedly at the youth hovering in the air before him. His mechanical steel wings were even trembling slightly because the operator's hands were shaking. You. Vulture's voice became sharp and trembling. How can you possibly fly? This is unscientific, no propulsion system, no anti-gravity equipment, what the hell are you? This was completely beyond his scope of understanding. Even those so-called mutants, or that Captain America whom the Avengers hyped to high heaven. It shouldn't be possible to defy the laws of physics to this extent, right? Faced with Vulture's questioning, which was as if he'd seen a ghost, Johnny Gilda merely adjusted his wind-blown bangs nonchalantly. Fly. Is that such a difficult thing? If you want to fly, don't you just fly? It's natural, I can't help it. Vre. Vulture nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Natural? What the hell do you mean natural? Do you think you're a birdman? Stop playing tricks. Vulture was, after all, an old hand who had survived the underground world for many years. After the brief shock, he immediately realized his current situation. He had to run. This weird kid was too sinister. As for that idiot rhino, just let him go to jail. But before running, he had to buy himself some time. So what if you can fly? These wings of mine use the most advanced turbine propulsion technology. My top speed can reach 150 kilometers per hour. In the sky I am the king. Vulture roared. The turbine engines on his back suddenly spat out a burst of blue flame. Using the massive thrust, he instantly catapulted backward. He did this to create distance. At the same time, the feather launchers on his wings opened fully. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Dozens of sharp steel feathers shot toward Johnny Gilda, covering the sky. Die freak. Vulture was confident that even if this kid could fly, he couldn't possibly dodge such a blanket attack. As long as he delayed him for a second, he could dive into the clouds and escape. However, the ideal was plump but reality was skinny. The very moment Vulture turned to accelerate away, he suddenly lost sight of the youth on his retinas. Disappeared. This is your speed limit. A voice tinged with a bit of disappointment rang out abruptly by Vulture's ear. He stiffly turned his head. He saw the youth who should have been shot into a sieve by the steel feathers, now flying side by side with him at the exact same speed. On that handsome face there wasn't even a drop of sweat. He could even see a hint of disdain in those eyes. Too slow. Johnny Gilda shook his head. Really too slow. Even a fly has more passion in its flight than you. Before Johnny Gilda, who had mastered Kai and Bukyujutsu, this kind of flight speed reliant on mechanical power was practically like a turtle crawling. You. Vulture's pupils shrank to the size of pinpricks. He just wanted to maneuver his wings to take evasive action. But Johnny Gilda had clearly lost the patience to continue playing. Go down, Johnny Gilda said indifferently. His right hand, which had been in his pocket, was pulled out instantly. Bang! It smashed solidly onto Vulture's metal mask. The massive force directly dented the mask inward. Along with it, the nasal bone and several front teeth inside turned into fragments. Vulture's brain instantly short-circuited, his eyes rolled back and he fell unconscious. The high-speed flying machine lost control. It spun wildly as it plummeted toward the ground. Johnny Gilda's figure flashed. He grabbed Vulture's ankle. Like carrying a dead chicken, he was relaxed and casual. Boom. Another dull thud echoed in the alley. Johnny Gilda descended from the sky. He casually tossed the unconscious Vulture beside the rhino, whose head was still stuck in the wall. The two villains, one big and one small, were laid out neatly. Done and dusted. Johnny Gilda brushed the dust off his hands and turned around. By now, the alley entrance was packed tight. Countless dark gun barrels were pointed toward them. But upon seeing that the one walking out was Johnny Gilda, those SWAT officers subconsciously swallowed and took a step back in unison. Their eyes were filled with awe and shock. The scene just now had caused too great an impact on their worldview. Physical flight. A one-punch instant kill. Was this something a human could do? Johnny. A graceful figure rushed past the police line regardless of everything. Gwen was like a startled fawn, crashing headlong into Johnny Gilda's embrace. She hugged Johnny Gilda's waist tightly, her body still trembling slightly. The moment Johnny Gilda flew into the sky just now, she was both proud and terrified. Afraid Johnny Gilda would get hurt. even more afraid that this boy would just fly away like that and never come back. I'm fine, silly. Johnny Gilda gently rubbed Gwen's soft blonde hair. Feeling the girl's attachment to him in his arms, he felt incredibly satisfied. This was the dividend of the hero saving the beauty. Ahem. An extremely deliberate cough sounded nearby. George Stacy walked over with a dark face. He looked at the two of them hugging tightly, especially seeing his own precious little cabbage, wishing she could merge into that brat's body. Chief George's mood was truly complicated. Sour. It was so damn sour. Although this kid had saved his daughter and saved him, and even helped the police department solve two big troubles, that didn't mean he could so blatantly root up his cabbage right in front of him. Gwen, let go first, George said with a stern face. Gwen only then reacted, her face turning red like a ripe apple as she reluctantly let go. But she still stood by Johnny Gilda's side, unwilling to move a single step. That protective manner made George feel even more stifled. Good grief. She wasn't even married off yet, and her heart had already drifted all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Mr. Gilda. George took a deep breath, forcing himself back into the dignified state of a police chief. He looked at Johnny Gilda with sharp eyes. While I'm very grateful for your help just now, however, regarding your ability to fly and this unscientific strength of yours, I think it's necessary to invite you back to the station for a cup of coffee and to make a statement. Speaking to this point, George paused, his tone softening slightly. Don't worry, it's not an arrest. Just a routine inquiry. Johnny Gilda wasn't surprised by this. It would be strange if George didn't ask. After all, this was the Marvel Universe, not Harry Potter. An ordinary college student suddenly being able to fly was big news. Of course, Chief. Johnny Gilda smiled slightly, acting very cooperative. It's also the duty of a good citizen. But Johnny Gilda pointed to Flash Thompson, who was still unconscious nearby, and those few school team members who were so scared they'd wet their pants. These bullies should also receive fair treatment, right? George glanced at those school bullies, and at the boy Peter, who had been cowering behind a trash can covering his eyes. He immediately understood what had just happened here. A flash of disgust crossed his eyes. Rest assured, in my jurisdiction, no one is above the law. Even if he's the son of a school board member, it won't work. An hour later, New York City Police Department, Chief's office. The blinds were drawn tight. The room was filled with smoke. George Stacy sat behind the desk, a nearly burnt-out cigarette in his hand. Those sharp hawk-like eyes stared fixedly at the young man sitting opposite him. And outside the door, one could vaguely hear Gwen's anxious packing and her constant questioning of officers, asking, "Is he done yet?" Johnny Gilda sat in the chair, composed. He even took an interest in observing the furnishings in George's office. Mr. Gilda. George stubbed out the cigarette, leaning forward slightly. Let's be blunt. I've checked your files. Orphan, parents deceased, inherited an estate, excellent grades, regular life. Aside from being excessively handsome, your resume is as ordinary as any of the millions in New York. But what happened in the alley today was not ordinary at all. Being able to create clones, knocking out a heavy-duty rhino with one punch, and even flying without any external aid. Tell me, child, who exactly are you? A mutant, an inhuman, or the product of some secret lab modification? George's gaze became incredibly serious. This was not just a police chief's vigilance toward extraordinary power. It was also a father's scrutiny of someone who might become his future son-in-law. If Johnny Gilda was a dangerous, unstable factor, or a pawn of some evil organization, then for Gwen's safety, even if it meant risking his old life, he would never let the two be together. Seeing George's look as if facing a great enemy, Johnny Gilda knew in his heart. This was the critical moment. This answer would directly determine whether he could smoothly clear Gwen's route in the future. It even determined whether he could gain some kind of official tacit approval in this Marvel universe. He had to make up, oh no. He had to state a reason that was both reasonable and showed he was harmless yet powerful. Chapter 12, The Father-in-Law's Approval. Director, actually, this is a bit sci-fi to explain. 10 years ago, near my old home in the suburbs, I picked up a meteorite fragment glowing with purple light. George's eyebrows twitched violently, and the ash from his cigarette fell onto his pant leg. A meteorite. That's right, it was the wreckage of some alien technology. Johnny began his performance, his tone so sincere he almost believed it himself. I was only 8 years old then, and I touched it out of curiosity. As a result, that thing turned into a beam of light and drilled into my body. I was unconscious for 3 whole days. When I woke up, I had some inexplicable powers in my body. Johnny sighed with a look of "I'm also very troubled" on his face. As I grew older, these abilities became stronger: flight, clones, and that kind of power that can punch through concrete. I swear I've never been to any secret labs. I'm just an ordinary genius college student. George stared at Johnny for a full half-minute. This kind of cliché alien encounter story would be thrown into the shredder by a director even in a Hollywood script. But in this New York where supervillains popped up all the time, this actually became the most scientific explanation for now. Even if he felt Johnny was talking nonsense in the absence of any evidence, he could only choose to believe it for the time being. At least this kid's record was as clean as a blank sheet of paper. Alien technology, huh? George rubbed his temples, his voice carrying a deep sense of exhaustion. Johnny, although this sounds like something out of Star Wars in this crazy world, I can only temporarily record it. Johnny shrugged but was laughing inwardly. Tusk, my father-in-law's ability to handle stress still needs improvement. If one day I transform into a Super Saiyan with my hair turning yellow and flashing with lightning, wouldn't you be scared straight to see Jesus? But George's tone shifted, suddenly becoming incredibly serious. This matter isn't over yet. Since you displayed supernatural powers in public, the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division has already intervened. Hearing this full name, Johnny's heart skipped a beat. Good grief. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. Isn't that just? These agents who follow the scent are moving this fast. That black braised egg Nick Fury is probably already imagining cutting me into thousands of pieces for research, isn't he? Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. Johnny raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. What's that? Some kind of mysterious charitable organization? It's a national agency that specifically handles unnatural events. George gave him a dry look. However, I've already negotiated with them. Considering you're still just a student and today was indeed a matter of self-defense and acting for justice. They've agreed to carry out an investigation without affecting your studies. Johnny nodded but couldn't help but sneer inwardly. I hope that braised egg doesn't treat me like some freak and lock me up. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind turning dark and first punching the Triskelion flat before skinning his black hide. Before that, I still want to be a playboy in a New York penthouse, holding Gwen and Wanda and talking about life. As for the investigation, let them do what they want as long as it doesn't stop me from getting my degree. Johnny looked indifferent. The atmosphere in the office softened slightly. George stubbed out his cigarette, his gaze softening but also becoming sharper. That was the exclusive look of a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. Next, let's talk about private matters. I saw it at the alley entrance today. When you saved Gwen, that look in your eyes and the way Gwen looked at you. Johnny didn't speak, just listened quietly. Old man, you really understand. I haven't even started trying yet. Johnny, I've checked your resume. You're an excellent kid, even ridiculously so. George stared intently into Johnny's eyes. Gwen is my only daughter. She is my life. I know young people like you with great power are always easily blinded by external temptations. I don't care what kind of person you become in the future, I only ask one thing of you. Be serious with Gwen. Johnny let it go in one ear and out the other, but his face wore the solemnity of a model student. Director, Gwen is my goddess, of course I will treat her well. Johnny raised his hand in a solemn vow, but added in his heart. But director, I need to get stronger. The system insists on me having many children, many blessings. I'm also very helpless. For the peace of the universe and to prevent Thanos from snapping his fingers, I can only wrong myself and be a hardworking playboy. I hope you all can understand my good intentions in the future. Looking at Johnny's sincere face, George finally breathed a sigh of relief. HMPH, I hope you remember what you said today. George patted Johnny's shoulder with great force, as if venting some emotion. Also, you did a great job taking down Rhino and Vulture today. If you hadn't stepped in, I don't know how many of my men would have been sacrificed. With Gwen by your side in the future, I can feel much more at ease. George waved his hand, indicating the statement was finished. Johnny stood up happily and straightened his collar. The father-in-law approved. Doesn't this mean I've gotten a pass to Gwen's room? Won't winning Gwen over happen tonight? When I get out later, I must find a way to ask this girl out for a big meal. Steak, red wine, candlelight, and then, hee. All right, you can go now. Gwen is waiting outside and she's about to wear a hole in the floor. George waved his hand dismissively. Johnny nodded politely, pulled open the heavy office door and walked out. Right in front of him was Gwen's beautiful face, filled with anxiety and concern. The halo of the setting sun spilled over her blonde hair. At this moment, Gwen was as beautiful as an oil painting. Johnny, are you okay? Did my dad give you a hard time? Gwen rushed over like a swallow returning to its nest, ignoring the strange looks from the surrounding officers, and once again gripped Johnny's hand tightly. Johnny gripped her soft palm back and leaned close to her ear to sniff the faint scent of her shampoo. I'm fine, your dad and I actually got along quite well. Johnny chuckled, feeling Gwen's delicate body tremble slightly, and leaned close to her pink earlobe. You've had such a scare, you must be hungry, right? How about I take you somewhere quiet to calm your nerves? Gwen felt Johnny's burning gaze. Under the gaze of those magical eyes, she felt a wave of numbness throughout her body. That reserve that originally belonged to a goddess had already turned into soft silk amidst the turbulent waves of this day. MHM. Gwen's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. She lowered her head and let Johnny lead her away. Chapter 13, Candlelight Dinner. Dusk in New York, the golden-red afterglow splashed wantonly through the streets and alleys. Johnny held Gwen's hand, walking boldly along the edge of Fifth Avenue. To be honest, the feeling was quite wonderful. Not long ago, he was in an alley giving Rhino a facial reconstruction surgery. Now he was accompanying a goddess shopping like an ordinary college student. This rhythm of jumping back and forth between violence and tenderness, tusk, it was damn thrilling. Johnny, where are we going later? Gwen asked in a small voice, her head lowered so far it was almost tucked into the impressive curves of her chest. Right now, her heart was beating even faster than when she faced Rhino earlier. Feeling the warmth from her palm, Johnny casually squeezed her soft, boneless knuckles. Hiss, this texture was simply like kneading a piece of top-tier, warm suet jade. As expected of a goddess with 100 favorability, even the scent of her sweat was sweet. Been busy all day, my stomach has been protesting for a while. Johnny turned his head, giving Gwen a devastatingly sunny smile. I know a 1-star Michelin French restaurant nearby. The chef's truffle steak is decent enough. Shall we give it a try? Gwen didn't know anything about Michelin stars. Her mind was currently a mess like a ball of yarn. French food, won't it be too formal? She looked down at her slightly messy skirt and the bit of dust she'd picked up at the alley entrance earlier. Formal, Gwen, in my eyes, even if you wore a burlap sack, you'd still be the only focus of the room. Johnny casually pulled out his phone and skillfully dialed the reservation number. In Manhattan, where money paves the way, as long as you act like a wealthy second-generation heir, a table. You can get one whenever you want. Hanging up the phone, Johnny noticed Gwen's footsteps had become somewhat stiff. He looked down. Good grief, this girl was staring intently at their tightly clasped hands. Her fingertips were trembling slightly, and the blush on her cheeks was about to spread down her neck and deep into her collar. Gwen's heart was currently in a frantic internal struggle. Oh my God, Stacy, have you gone crazy? How long have you known this boy? Not even 24 hours. Holding hands, shouldn't that be a logical progression after at least 3 dates, 2 movies, and receiving flowers once? How are we already naturally holding hands now? She wanted to pull her hand back, but then she wondered if doing so would make Johnny feel like she was rejecting him. What if he doesn't pat her head anymore? What if he doesn't save her anymore? Caught in a dilemma, these words were practically tailor-made for Gwen at this moment. "What's wrong, Gwen?" Johnny stopped in his tracks and leaned in close with a wicked grin. "Is the New York sun too enthusiastic, making your face turn this red from the heat?" He was asking despite knowing the answer. As an experienced player, if he couldn't recognize this kind of maidenly reaction, then those dozens of gigabytes of study materials from his past life would have been for nothing. Yarabit, today's sun is indeed quite strong. Gwen nodded hurriedly, her eyes darting around guiltily. Motherfucker. Johnny couldn't help but complain in his heart. Strong sun. The sunset is about to drop below the horizon, all right. This little girl, as expected of someone inexperienced, turns red as a ripe tomato with just a bit of teasing. I think maybe it's not because of the sun. Johnny suddenly stopped, leaning forward slightly, his voice carrying a hint of improper magnetism. It's probably because my hand is quite warm, so it rubbed off on you. Gwen felt her brain go buzz, and a surge of heat hit the top of her head. He's definitely flirting with me. He's doing it on purpose. Damn it, why don't I hate this feeling at all? Her mind involuntarily began to replay moments. His focus when he praised her as a genius, his gentleness when he patted her head, and his dominance when he snatched her out from under Rhino's horn. It's over. Gwen, you've completely fallen. This man is not only unfairly handsome and ridiculously strong, but he's also so good at. Johnny, you don't say anymore. Gwen's voice was as low as a mosquito's buzz. Yet not only did she not pull her hand back, she secretly snuggled it further into Johnny's palm. Tusk, the power of 100 favorability truly does not disappoint. Before long, the two arrived at the French restaurant located at the top of a high-rise building. With a wave of his hand, Johnny booked a private room by the window. Candlelight, fresh flowers, and a prime view of the Manhattan riverfront. Here you could elegantly cut your steak while overlooking the traffic below, humble as ants. Of course, the price for this atmosphere was $1,500. This price might mean eating dirt for 3 months for an ordinary person, but in Johnny's eyes, it was worth every penny. Was this just eating steak? This was buying a ticket to a home run. Johnny, this wine, didn't we order a bit too much? Gwen looked at the bottle of red wine on the table with its complex French label, pursing her lips somewhat uneasily. Due to her top student rationality, she subconsciously calculated the price of this meal in her head. $1,500. My God, this is practically burning money. It's fine, Gwen, money only gains a soul when it's spent on you. Johnny elegantly filled her glass, his eyes full of the generosity of drink as much as you want, I have plenty of money. However, subscribe for more amazing novel audiobooks. Don't forget to like, comment, and share Infinite Novel Audio. In his heart, he silently gave the system a thumbs up. To smoothly initiate academic exchange tonight, he specifically chose a bottle of top-tier Bordeaux with a very strong kick. This kind of wine tastes sweet like grape juice when you drink it. But once the alcohol hits, that kick can definitely turn any reserved girl into a lazy little kitten. Despicable. No, this is called mutual consent. Looking at Johnny's serious gaze, Gwen was deeply moved. He spent so much money just to have a meal with me. I can't be too wasteful either. Since it's ordered, I'll try my best to finish it. Thus, the two people, each with their own designs, one pure, one for exchange, began to eat and chat. They talked about interesting things at school, Professor Connor's eccentricities, and even their plans for the future. Johnny was good at listening, occasionally inserting a deeply insightful or deadpan humorous comment. It made Gwen's crisp laughter echo through the private room. Red wine glass after red wine glass. It had to be said, Gwen's alcohol tolerance was indeed not great. After 3 glasses, a watery mist had already clouded her pair of azure eyes. The light in the private room was dim, with only the cluster of orange-red candlelight flickering in the center. Outside the window were flowing neon lights and cold moonlight. And the man opposite her, under the filter of alcohol, was so handsome he looked like a sun god stepped out of myth. "Johnny." Gwen propped up her chin, looking at him with misty eyes. "I used to think boys should all be like my father said, stubborn and boring. But the you I saw today seems different." Johnny set down his wine glass and naturally walked around the table to stand behind Gwen. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the back of the chair. His warm breath blew directly onto Gwen's neck, which was as white as porcelain. Gwen's delicate body shuddered violently, a tingling sensation climbing straight up from her tailbone. "How am I different?" Johnny's voice was husky. His large hand had unknowingly rested on her shoulder, his fingertips lightly stroking her tender skin. "You're very bad." Gwen turned her head, the distance between them was so close they could count each other's eyelashes. She could smell the scent of red wine and cedar on Johnny. That aggressive masculine aura caused her last shred of top student rationality to snap instantly. Johnny didn't speak. His response was a kiss that was both dominant and tender. "MMM." Gwen's pupils dilated instantly, then slowly closed. She felt like a leaf fluttering in a storm. She could only grip Johnny's collar tightly, letting herself sink into this vortex filled with the taste of red wine. Johnny also felt a surge of excitement in his heart. This taste was indeed more than 10,000 times better than playing virtual interactions in that crappy game. After a long time, their lips parted. Gwen was slumped in Johnny's arms, her breathing ragged. "Gwen," Johnny whispered in her ear, his voice carrying an irresistible temptation. "It's getting late. Queens is too far to go back to now. I happen to book a room nearby where we can see the stars. Shall we go there and continue our exchange on biology?" Gwen buried her head in his chest in shame. Her small hands tightly gripped the hem of his shirt as she gave a response as faint as a mosquito's buzz. "Mwah." A confident, wicked smile curled at the corner of Johnny's mouth. He scooped Gwen up and led her out of the restaurant by the hand with large strides. Tonight's academic research was destined to consume a vast amount of physical strength and energy. Meanwhile, on the top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, in front of a massive floor-to-ceiling window, a burly man weighing at least 400 pounds with muscles as hard as granite stood expressionlessly. Wilson Fisk, also known as Kingpin, the man who made New York's underworld tremble with fear. Behind him, his confidant Wesley handed over a tablet with a grave expression. "Sir, the latest news. Alexei Rhino and Toombs Vulture are already in custody. This situation is a bit troublesome. The police station says someone is preventing them from being bilayed out." Kingpin said nothing. His eyes, sunken deep into his flesh, stared intently at a photo on the screen. It was a surveillance screenshot from an alley near Empire State University. In the photo was a young man in a black hoodie, his looks excessively handsome. He was throwing a punch at Rhino's jaw with a faint, mocking expression. "Johnny Gilda." Kingpin spoke slowly. He squeezed the expensive cigar in his hand with force. With a crack. The cigar, worth a month's salary for an ordinary person, instantly turned into a pile of debris under his monstrous strength. Tobacco scraps fell from between his fingers. "Find out everything about him." Kingpin turned around, his entire figure shrouded in shadow. "In New York, no one cuts off my Fisk's source of income and lives to tell about it." Chapter 14, Combat Power Multiplied by 10. In the early morning of New York, a trace of night's chill still lingered in the air. At the entrance of the Hilton Hotel on 5th Avenue, Johnny walked out with large strides, holding Gwen's hand. Today, Johnny still looked refreshed and radiant. On that handsome face hung a satisfied smile that all men would understand. He seemed like an Iron Man reactor that had just been fully charged, with energy radiating from every part of his body. Gwen, on the other hand, this top student goddess who usually walked with the wind, now looked like an injured kitten. With every step she took, her beautiful legs, clad in stockings, trembled slightly. There was a hint of fatigue between her brows, but more than that, there was the shyness and charm that follows a first experience. Slower, Johnny. Gwen tugged at Johnny's sleeve, her voice a bit hoarse. That was the aftereffect of last night's overly intense academic debate. Sorry, habit. Johnny immediately slowed his pace, taking Gwen's soft, boneless hand into his palm. His other hand naturally wrapped around her slender waist, supporting her like a human crutch. Does it still hurt? Johnny lowered his head, leaning into Gwen's ear to ask in a voice only the two of them could hear. His tone carried a bit of teasing, but also a bit of concern. How can you still say that? Gwen's face instantly turned bright red, like a ripe tomato. She irritably pinched the soft flesh at Johnny's waist, but couldn't bring herself to use any real force. Johnny chuckled with a thick skin and hailed a taxi. He gentlemanly shielded Gwen as she got into the car, not forgetting to considerately place a soft pillow behind her. This smooth series of actions made Gwen feel warm inside. This bad guy. Though he was as overbearing as a beast in that regard. In normal times, he was as gentle as a prince. Is this the feeling of being in love? Empire State University. When the two appeared on the campus avenue, they unsurprisingly became the focus of attention once again. Especially Gwen's slightly unnatural walking posture. In the eyes of certain experienced observers, it was practically the most obvious report of the battle's intensity. Yo, look who it is. A playful voice rang out. Felicia Hardy leaned against a lamppost, twirling her car keys in her hand. Those cat-like eyes scanned back and forth between the two of them. Finally, they settled on Gwen's unusually flushed face. Morning, biology geniuses. Felicia let out a whistle and walked over with a cat-like stride. She leaned in to sniff Gwen, a playful smirk appearing on her face. Tusk, 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 Gwen, your scent has changed. It's a mix of hormones and, the sweetness of milk. Last night's academic exchange must have been very intense, right? Felicia's words made Gwen want to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. No, don't talk nonsense. Gwen waved her hands frantically, her eyes darting away, not daring to look at Felicia at all. We just happened to run into each other at the school gate, right, Johnny? Looking at Gwen's adorable attempt at a cover-up. Johnny suppressed a laugh and nodded solemnly. That's right, classmate Felicia. As upright college students, we spent last night in a room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a starry ceiling, discussing the possibilities of DNA sequence recombination throughout the night. As for the scent you mentioned, Johnny raised an eyebrow, his gaze scanning Felicia's hot figure without restraint. Maybe next time you can come and smell it for yourself. You little pervert. Felicia rolled her eyes at him. But the interest in her eyes grew even stronger. A man who dared to flirt back like this in front of her was rare. But having said that, Felicia dropped her joking attitude and looked at Johnny. You're a big celebrity in school now. The incident in the alley yesterday has spread like crazy. Using Rhino as a punching bag and being able to fly, tusk tusk, everyone on the forums is guessing which alien prince's bastard son you are. But you should be careful, while Flash Thompson is a waste, his father is a school board member. I heard that guy is still lying in the ICU, and his bone-setting surgery took 8 hours. His family probably won't let this go easily. Johnny shrugged with an indifferent expression. I was forced into self-defense. Everyone saw it, he was the one who insisted on dragging me into the alley to exchange feelings. As for the fractures, maybe he's just calcium deficient. Seeing Johnny's unbothered attitude, Felicia burst out laughing. All right, you certainly have a good mindset. Anyway, good luck, my Apollo. With that, Felicia blew a kiss to Johnny and turned to walk away, swaying her hips. Gwen watched Felicia's retreating back and subconsciously hugged Johnny's arm tighter. Her vigilance was at its peak. The first class of the morning was English literature. For a science student like Johnny, it was practically a lullaby. He sat in the back row of the classroom, propping his chin with one hand. His other hand was busy under the table, playing with Gwen's small hand. This caused Gwen to glare at him with a red face from time to time. Just then, ding! The long-awaited system notification sounded in Johnny's mind. Congratulations to the host, successfully completed the first deep exchange with the S-rank comprehensive rating beauty, Gwen Stacy. Many children, many blessings system, reward settlement in progress. Reward 1, given the host's outstanding performance and high affinity base, the base combat power is doubled. Boom! A surge of heat more violent than before, instantly swept through his entire body. His original 110 combat power points instantly surged. 220 points. But it wasn't over yet. Ding, special circumstances detected. Congratulations to the host, triggered hidden achievement 1 shot 1 kill. Detected that the target Gwen Stacy has successfully conceived. A new addition to the family, congratulations. Triggered critical hit reward, base combat power times 10. PFFFT. Johnny almost spat out his own saliva. What the hell? Conceived. This was too accurate, wasn't it? This hit rate, a true sharpshooter. Before he could recover from the shock, a terrifying energy that made even his soul tremble erupted within his body like a tsunami. 220 combat power points multiplied directly by 10. 2,200 points. Johnny suddenly clenched his fist. He felt that he was now terrifyingly strong. If the previous 110 combat power points were within the realm of human peak or low-level superhumans, then the current 2,200 points, that was definitely planet-level combat power. You should know, in the original Dragon Ball, that Raditz, who arrived on Earth and scared the life out of King Piccolo, only had a combat power of 1,500. And Raditz could flatten a city with a casual strike and even withstand the special beam cannon. The current him was even stronger than Raditz by a significant margin. Johnny's eyes instantly became incredibly fiery. He quickly calculated the power level comparisons in the Marvel Universe. The current Iron Man Tony Stark, wearing the Mark III or Mark IV. His combat power would be around 200 or 300 at most. Even that Hulkbuster armor built later to deal with Hulk would only reach a bit over 1,000. As for others, Namo swimming in the water. Those super Skrulls who only know how to mimic. Even the future Vision with a gem on his head or Ronan the Accuser with his hammer, in front of the current him, aren't they all just little brothers? Woohoo, awesome. Johnny couldn't help but roar in his heart. And this was just from winning over one Gwen. If he were to take down Felicia, Wanda, Polaris, and the others, wouldn't he directly transform into Super Saiyan 4, tear Thanos apart and trample the Celestials? This many children, many blessings system is truly amazing. Johnny turned his head to look at Gwen, who was seriously taking notes beside him. His eyes were filled with tenderness and love for the experience points. How was this just a girlfriend? This was clearly his lucky goddess, his superpower bank. And she might already have his little Saiyan in her belly. At the thought of this, Johnny's hand unconsciously covered Gwen's flat lower abdomen. Johnny, what's wrong? Gwen turned her head in confusion and feeling the warmth on her abdomen, her face turned red again. We're in the classroom. It's nothing, I just suddenly thought you look especially beautiful today. Johnny leaned in and whispered to her. But in his heart he was thinking, my dear son or daughter, you better grow well. Whether your dad can transform into a Super Saiyan depends on you. However, just as Johnny was immersed in the joy of his surging strength, bang! The classroom door was violently pushed open. The loud noise startled everyone. The English teacher on the podium pushed up his glasses, about to get angry. But after seeing who had entered, he immediately shut his mouth. Standing at the door was a middle-aged bald man in a suit with a face full of flesh. Behind him followed several burly school security guards. The dean of Empire State University, Dean. He was also a notorious snob, a lackey who specialized in cleaning up the messes of the young masters and ladies from the board members' families. Dean had a gloomy face and his gaze scanned the classroom. Finally, he locked onto Johnny sitting in the back row. Johnny Gilda. Dean roared, his saliva flying everywhere. Stand up. Pack your things and come to the dean's office immediately. Now immediately. The classroom instantly burst into a commotion. All the students turned in unison to look at Johnny in the back row. Whispers broke out everywhere. It's over, the dean came in person. It's definitely because of the Flash Thompson incident yesterday. I heard Thompson's dad rushed into the principal's office with a team of lawyers early this morning, vowing to make the guy who hit him rot in jail. Sigh, what a pity, such a handsome new school hunk is going to be expelled right after arriving and might even go to jail. Gwen's face instantly turned deathly pale. She tightly grabbed Johnny's hand. Johnny! Her voice was trembling. Although her father was the police director, in the face of the power of capital, the law could sometimes become pale and powerless. Especially since Flash was indeed seriously injured, this qualified as a serious assault incident. If the school insisted on pursuing it, don't be afraid. Johnny gently patted the back of Gwen's hand, giving her a reassuring look. Then, he slowly stood up, facing the aggressive dean and the security guards. There wasn't a trace of fear on his face, instead there was a playful smile. Would a powerhouse with 2,200 combat power points be afraid of a dean? Don't be ridiculous. Mr. Dean, is it? Johnny unhurriedly adjusted his collar. What's with the big temper? Perfect, I also want to talk to the school about the definition of campus bullying and self-defense. Lead the way. Chapter 15, A Trip to Empire State University. In the corridors of Empire State University. Classmate Gilda, I hope you understand your current situation. Dean of Academic Affairs Dean was walking in front. He adjusted his somewhat tight suit tie while speaking in a voice as harsh as a drake's. He glanced back at Johnny, who followed with hands in pockets and a relaxed expression, causing the muscles at the corner of his eyes to twitch. This kid still acting like this when death is at his door. Does he really think being handsome means he can use the school rules as toilet paper? You'd better pray young Master Thompson gets out of the ICU soon and is willing to forgive you. Dean stopped and turned around. He pointed a chubby finger at Johnny's chest, spittle flying everywhere. Otherwise you won't just be facing expulsion. The Thompson family's legal team is enough to make you lose every bit of your pitiful inheritance, and then you'll be picking up soap in prison for the rest of your life. Hearing this, Johnny raised an eyebrow. He looked at the fleshy, middle-aged, bald man before him who was posturing with borrowed authority. A disdainful sneer curled at the corner of his mouth. Mr. Dean, did you forget to brush your teeth this morning? Or did you just have your fill in the restroom? Johnny reached out and waved his hand in front of his nose in disgust. Quite the breath you have there. You. Dean's face turned red with rage. Do I need to educate you on the term self-defense? And about the definition of school bullying? I think the Board of Trustees would be very interested to see how the Dean of Academic Affairs they pay so well is shielding a board member's son who led an assault. Johnny looked down at him with a playful glint in his eyes. What do you think, Mr. Dean the lackey? You. Dean trembled with rage, his finger pointing at Johnny, shaking uncontrollably. Rebellious. This is simply outrageous. In all his years at Empire State University, which student hadn't been respectful to him like a mouse seeing a cat? Yet this Johnny Gilda not only didn't care, but even turned around to lecture him. Fine, very well. Dean laughed out of sheer anger, his eyes venomous. I hope that when we get to the school committee's office and face Mr. Thompson, your mouth will still be this tough. Johnny shrugged. He followed behind. He wanted to see what this school committee was planning to do to him. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C., the Triskelion. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division SHIELD headquarters. Inside an office, Agent Phil Coulson was holding a cup of steaming coffee. He looked at an electronic report in his hand with a slight frown. The screen showed a surveillance screenshot from that alleyway in New York City yesterday. Although the image was a bit blurry, it was still clear. How that black-haired youth had snatched the several hundred-kilogram vulture out of the sky like a little chick. And that kind of physical flight that completely defied the laws of physics. Alien meteorite fragments. Coulson looked at the transcript sent from the NYPD and couldn't help but laugh. This excuse they made up is a bit too perfunctory. These days, even aliens might not use such a cliché script. As a veteran agent who had dealt with various supernatural phenomena for years, what kind of scene had Coulson not witnessed? 10 years ago, this might have been brushed off. But now, ever since that Tony Stark in his tin can started flying all over the sky, and a blonde hunk with a hammer started smashing floors everywhere, the world's vibe had long since gone completely off the rails. However, Coulson took a sip of his coffee, his gaze becoming profound. Nonsensical as the reason may be, this kid's strength is the real deal. According to the site survey, the force of that punch that knocked out the rhino was at least 50 tons. And that flight ability shows no signs of thrusters or heat signatures. It's almost as if those legendary Superman comics have come to life. Coulson set down his cup, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. The purpose of SHIELD's existence is to deal with such unexplainable threats. Normally, according to protocol, a metahuman of this level should be directly contained by a rapid response team, then sent to the sandbox base for evaluation, which meant being sliced up for research. But the director has been fast-tracking that Avengers initiative lately. Coulson thought about what that one-eyed bald guy had been worrying about recently. That egomaniac Tony Stark might have joined the consultant group, but he doesn't follow orders at all. The Hulk is a ticking time bomb that could go off at any moment. Captain America is just a super soldier. SHIELD is currently too short on high-end combat power. Especially one like this, who looks handsome, maybe even a bit like his younger self. A young man with a clean background and a sense of justice, at least he beat up criminals. With a little guidance, he could become an excellent blade. Beep beep. Just then, the communicator on the desk lit up. A SHIELD agent in charge of monitoring sent an emergency briefing. Officer, the target, Johnny Gilda, has just been taken away by the Dean of Academic Affairs of Empire State University. According to intelligence, the Thompson family, who are on the board, intend to use their connections to sue him for intentional assault and are pressuring the school to expel him. They might even resort to some unconventional means. Seeing this message, Coulson's eyes narrowed. A gentle smile returned to his face. Unconventional means. On this land, besides us at SHIELD, who else would dare use unconventional means against a target of this danger level? This is practically pulling a tiger's teeth. If they truly push this young man too far. Given the combat power he displayed yesterday, forget the Thompson family, he'd probably turn the entire Empire State University upside down. When that happens, won't it be SHIELD cleaning up the mess? Stupid capital and bureaucracy. Coulson shook his head, stood up, and straightened his well-tailored black suit. It seems this is a good opportunity for contact. Providing help in an hour of need is always more impressive than adding flowers to a bouquet, isn't it? Rather than letting this young man be driven to the opposing side by the darkness of society and become an extremist like Magneto. It's better to lend him a hand now. Let him feel the warmth of the authorities. That way, if we want to recruit him into the Avengers later or have him help with some thorny troubles, it will be easier to ask, won't it? What do you call this? This is called the way of the world. With that thought, Coulson picked up his car keys. Notify the strike team, take 3 agents and come with me to Empire State University. Also, Coulson instructed into the communicator. Help me contact the New York City Department of Education and the head of the Thompson family. Tell them SHIELD is conducting a classified mission involving national security. If anyone dares to cause trouble at this time, then invite them to have tea at Guantanamo. Hanging up, Coulson strode out of the office. Let's go, let's meet this lucky fellow who found an alien meteorite. Chapter 1. Thompson. Empire State University, Board of Trustees meeting room. Creak. As the door was pushed open, Johnny walked in leisurely with his hands in his pockets. That look. He didn't look like a student coming to receive judgment. He looked more like a leader coming to inspect the work. Hey, you close the door, there's a bit of a draft. Johnny even had the leisure to turn back and give an order to Dean, the dean of students, who was following behind him. You! Dean's face turned purple with rage, and he was just about to explode. But thinking of the big shot sitting inside, he immediately put on a fawning expression and trotted in. In the center of the meeting room, around a huge oval conference table, sat middle-aged men in suits and leather shoes. And the one sitting in the main seat was a bloated man with a face full of flesh and exceptionally sinister eyes. Harrison Thompson, the father of Flash Thompson, who was still lying in the ICU. One of the largest board members of Empire State University. Bang! Seeing Johnny enter, Harrison slammed the table and stood up. That fat face trembled slightly with anger. It's you! Harrison rushed in front of Johnny in a few steps. That finger with a gold ring almost poked Johnny's nose. It was you, you bastard, who injured my son. Spit flew everywhere. Johnny leaned his head back in disgust. Talk if you want to talk, but don't spray water. Also, it was self-defense, thank you. Self-defense. Harrison laughed out of extreme anger, a cold laugh that made one's heart chill. Crushing a person's hand bones, breaking 3 ribs, and even causing a severe concussion. You call that self-defense? Exactly, this kid did it. Dean, the dean of students, immediately approached like a lapdog and shouted at Johnny. Mr. Thompson, this kid is a troublemaker in school. Disrespectful to elders, ignoring school rules, he's simply a black sheep. I suggest immediate expulsion, and he should be sent to prison. Looking at Dean jumping up and down, Johnny couldn't help but click his tongue. Mr. Dean, your skill at guarding the house is quite well practiced. You must eat a lot of bones usually, right? You bastard. Dean's face turned blue and white from the insult, but in front of Harrison, he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. He could only stare at Johnny with venomous eyes. Enough! Harrison roared, interrupting Johnny's sarcasm. He stared at Johnny with ruthless eyes. Kid, you're pretty arrogant, aren't you? It seems you haven't figured out the situation yet. Here I am the rules. Now, not only will you be expelled from school, but you will also have to compensate for all my son's medical expenses. That's the best private hospital, the best ICU ward, burning money every minute. That pitiful savings of yours probably won't even cover the change. Wait for bankruptcy. Wait to spend the rest of your life in prison. Harrison's words were like a death sentence. The other school leaders around also showed expressions of gloating. In their view, having offended Harrison, this student with no background was already a dead man. However, facing these overwhelming accusations and threats, a strange smile appeared on Johnny's face. Bankruptcy, prison. Just by your word. Johnny shook his head and suddenly took a step forward. Under everyone's shocked gazes, he walked straight to the huge conference table. Then, he plopped down in the main seat that originally belonged to Harrison. He propped his legs up on the table and leaned back. That posture was as arrogant as it could be. I think you might have misunderstood something. Johnny looked around at the stunned crowd, finally letting his gaze rest on Harrison, who was trembling with rage. First, it was your son who was openly bullying a classmate at the school gate. Second, I was acting out of righteousness. Finally, and most importantly, Johnny extended a finger and tapped the tabletop lightly. If I hadn't stepped in to deal with those 2 supervillains, your precious son would have been crushed into meat paste by the rhino long ago. So, Johnny spread his hands, looking like it was only natural. Shouldn't you be thanking me? Expel me, compensation. What are you dreaming about? I think not only can you not expel me. Instead, you should hold a school-wide commendation meeting for me and award me some outstanding youth award or something. As for the scholarship, Johnny rubbed his chin. Just as a token of appreciation, a full scholarship will do. And in the future, if there are any good academic resources, they must be prioritized for me. After all, a genius like me, who is both skilled in letters and martial arts, is the living brand of your school. In the entire meeting room, one could hear a pin drop. Everyone looked at Johnny as if they were looking at a fool. This kid, is he crazy? He beat up the board member's son, and instead of thinking about how to beg for mercy, He actually turned around and negotiated terms with the board member. Commendation scholarship. How much fake alcohol did he drink? Harrison suddenly burst into a fit of wild laughter. He laughed so hard that tears almost came out. Good, good, good. He pointed at Johnny, laughing uncontrollably. In all my years, this is the first time I've seen such a reckless thing. Who do you think you are? Saved my son, that's what you should have done. Injured my son, that's your crime. Dean and the other leaders also laughed along. Their eyes were full of mockery and disdain. Gilda, have you not woken up yet? This is the real world, not your hero dream. If you hit someone, you have to pay the price. Wait to rot in prison. Harrison stopped laughing, leaving only cruelty and coldness on his face. No need to talk nonsense with him. Security, throw him out for me. The notice of expulsion will be sent to your home immediately. As for the lawyer's letter, Harrison sneered. I will let you know what the power of capital is. You can get lost now. Just then, ring ring ranged. A sharp phone ring suddenly broke the silence of the meeting room. Harrison frowned. He pulled out his phone somewhat impatiently. This was his private number, and not many people knew it. Hello, this is Harrison. What's the matter? I'm dealing with that ungrateful student. However, the next second, Harrison's originally overbearing face instantly froze. The original anger and arrogance receded quickly like a tide. It was replaced by an unbelievable shock and deep fear. Why, what? Homeland Strategic Defense. Protected person. How is this possible? Harrison's voice was trembling, and cold sweat instantly broke out on his forehead. The voice from the other end of the phone was very calm. I am Phil Coulson. Regarding Mr. Johnny Gilda, he is now a high-level protected person of our Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. Any unfavorable charges against him must be withdrawn immediately. If Mr. Johnny suffers any grievance due to your foolish behavior, or if something as ridiculous as expulsion happens, then the Thompson family will face very serious consequences. This. Harrison felt like the sky was falling. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. That legendary, mysterious organization that stood above everything. Why would they step in for an ordinary college student? And it was such a dead-end order with no room for maneuver. At the same time, ding ding ding. In the meeting room, the phones of several other school leaders also rang one after another. Hello, Director of Education. What, withdraw the punishment? Must commend him, and it was personally instructed by the mayor. The sounds of answering the phone rose and fell. Every person who finished the call had a face as ugly as if they had eaten a fly. They looked in horror at Johnny, who was still sitting in the main seat, looking calm and even playing with a pen on the table. Their eyes had completely changed. How was this some poor kid with no background? This was clearly a great Buddha that one could not afford to offend. Johnny watched this scene, although he didn't understand exactly what happened. But judging from their expressions, something interesting must have happened. Interesting. Chapter 17, SHIELDS Donuts. Inside the conference room, Harrison Thompson's hand holding the phone was still trembling slightly. He looked at Johnny, who was sitting in the main seat with a calm expression and even a hint of a playful smile. It felt as if someone had gripped his heart tightly, even breathing became difficult. The Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, that privileged agency that only existed in legends. They actually stepped forward for this student with no background. And it was even a top-level protection order. What did this mean? It meant that behind this seemingly harmless young man stood the entire state apparatus. And he had just threatened to make him rot in jail. And even demanded compensation. Thompson felt a chill run from the soles of his feet straight to the top of his head. It's over. This time he had kicked a titanium alloy plate. Mr. Thompson, what are you waiting for? Johnny toyed with the pen in his hand and spoke calmly. Didn't you just say you were going to have the security guards throw me out? What, are the guards lost? No. Thompson snapped back to his senses, his face instantly plastered with a smile that looked worse than crying. A misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Classmate Gilda, I was impulsive just now, I didn't understand the situation. Please, please don't take it to heart. This face-changing speed was faster than flipping a page. Seeing this, the other school leaders also tucked away their gloating expressions. Each sat upright and focused, terrified that the fire would spread to them. Except for Dean of Academic Affairs Dean, who was standing to the side. This guy clearly still hadn't figured out the situation. Or maybe the amount of information in that instant was too much, short-circuiting his already small brain. Director Thompson, what are you saying? Dean approached with a confused look and shouted at Johnny while pointing. Gilda, you disrespectful brat, get out of that chair right now. Is that a place where you're allowed to sit? Who do you think you are, talking to Mr. Thompson like that? I think you really don't want to stay here anymore. Thompson was trembling with rage. Even at a time like this guy was still making trouble for him. He pointed at the door and roared. Get out. Now immediately right now, disappear from my sight. Hi. Dean was completely dumbfounded. This isn't how the script was supposed to go. Weren't we just about to crush this kid? Why am I the one being told to get out all of a sudden? Tusk. Johnny shook his head with a look of pity. It seems no matter how hard the dog bites, the master doesn't care. Mr. Dean, it looks like your career as a watchdog isn't going so well. You. Dean was so angry he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He glared at Johnny resentfully, but under Thompson's murderous gaze. He could only slink away with his tail between his legs. Just then, subscribe for more amazing novel audiobooks. Don't forget to like, comment, and share Infinite Novel Audio. Knock. The conference room door was pushed open again. 4 agents in black suits and sunglasses, radiating an aura that warned people to stay away, walked in. Leading them was a middle-aged man with a slightly high hairline and a gentle smile on his face. Phil Coulson, the nice guy of SHIELD, and also the most trusted confidant of that black braised egg director. Johnny raised an eyebrow. Here already. They move pretty fast. Hello everyone, I am Phil Coulson. Coulson showed his ID and smiled slightly at the crowd. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. We have some questions regarding national security and would like Mr. Gilda to assist with our investigation. I assume no one has any objections. As soon as Thompson saw the eagle emblem on the ID, his legs went weak. He hurriedly trotted over, bowing and scraping. No objections, of course not. Everything will be as you arrange. About what was said on the phone. Coulson glanced at him, his smile remained gentle but his eyes were chillingly cold. Remember what I said. If Mr. Gilda receives any unfair treatment at this school, or if any accidents occur, then we will conduct a thorough security audit of the entire Empire State University. I believe Mr. Thompson knows what that would entail. Thompson broke into a cold sweat and nodded frantically. Understood, I will certainly comply. After warning Thompson, Coulson finally walked up to Johnny. Mr. Gilda, please come with us. There are some things we need to discuss elsewhere. Johnny shrugged and stood up from the chair. Let's go. The air in here is a bit stale anyway, I'd like to get some fresh air. Under the awe-filled gazes of the school leaders, Johnny followed Coulson and the others swaggering out of the conference room to the school gate. A pitch-black Chevrolet Suburban SUV was parked by the roadside. The windows were tinted with one-way film, making it impossible to see inside from the outside. Johnny sat in the back seat with Coulson right beside him. Want one? Just bought them. Coulson pulled a pink donut out of a paper bag and held it out to Johnny. I won't mind if I do. Johnny took the donut and took a large bite. Strawberry flavored and quite sweet. I've read the statement you gave at the police station. Coulson looked at Johnny with deep, searching eyes. Alien meteorite fragments. Mr. Gilda, as much as I'd like to believe that story, I have to say it sounds a bit like a sci-fi plot from the last century. Really? Johnny swallowed the donut in his mouth, looking perfectly innocent. When I was a kid, I thought it was a dream too. But art imitates life, doesn't it? Who would have thought that even aliens would be so careless with their trash these days? Carlson stared at Johnny for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed. Fair point. In a world where even gods fly around with hammers, finding a meteorite fragment doesn't seem all that strange. He didn't dwell on the matter. As long as the person was under control, whether it was a meteorite didn't matter. What mattered was whether this blade could be used by. We've already settled things with the school board. Carlson took a document out of his briefcase and handed it to Johnny. This is your new file. In addition to keeping your enrollment, we've also applied for a full scholarship for you, along with some special academic privileges. You can consider this a small token of our appreciation. Johnny took the document and scanned it, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Good grief. He certainly knows how to do things right. Not only was the trouble resolved, but they also threw in quite a few benefits. What do they call this? This is called, it's good to have a big tree to lean on for shade. Thanks. Johnny closed the file. But I assume you're not doing this out of charity. Of course not. Carlson nodded. We hope you can maintain your current lifestyle and stay in school. If necessary, we will contact you for some ability assessment tests. Naturally, this would be under the premise that it doesn't interfere with your normal life and rest. After all, for a young man with such great power as yourself, it would be a loss for all of humanity if you were to go astray due to a lack of guidance. Johnny rolled his eyes. Guidance? More like surveillance. But he didn't care. As long as it didn't stop him from wooing girls, everything else was fine. Fine. Johnny stretched. Just don't take up too much of my dadding time. After all, as you know, for a college student, dadding is the most important thing. Carlson smiled and handed Johnny a business card. This is my private number, you can contact me if you have any trouble. Have a pleasant life, Mr. Gilda. The SUV pulled over to the side of the road. Johnny pushed the door open and got out. It happened to be a break between classes. People were coming and going on the campus boulevard. Johnny had only taken a couple of steps when a familiar fragrant breeze wafted toward him. Hey there, big celebrity. Felicia Hardy appeared out of nowhere. She was wearing a tight black leather jacket that accentuated her impressive figure perfectly. Her cat-like eyes shimmered with curiosity. Was that a SHIELD vehicle just now? Not bad, you've already made contact with the authorities. Gwen was worried sick, constantly messaging me to ask about you. So, you didn't get sliced up for research, did you? Johnny chuckled and shook the document bag in his hand. Of course not. We just discussed some academic issues regarding alien civilizations. And I offered some constructive suggestions to the school while I was at it. That's good. Felicia breathed a sigh of relief and took out her phone to send Gwen a message saying he was safe. Then, she looked up, her seductive eyes staring straight at Johnny. Her tongue lightly brushed her red lips with a faint hint of flirtation. Since you're fine, how about doing me a favor? I know a very good Japanese restaurant nearby. I want to. Felicia leaned in close to Johnny's ear, her breath like orchids. I want to have a good taste. What exactly does the hero who saved the whole school taste like? Sigh, this boomerang. It came back pretty fast. Looking at Felicia's yours for the taking expression, Johnny felt a secret surge of pleasure. Why would anyone refuse a beauty of Black Cat's caliber when she offers herself? Not to mention, the many children many blessings system is still waiting to be upgraded. The pleasure is all mine. A wicked grin curled on Johnny's lips as he naturally wrapped his arm around Felicia's slender waist. Meanwhile, on the SHIELD SUV as it slowly drove away, Carlson took out his phone and sent a sternly worded text to Thompson. The content was simple. Fulfill all of Johnny Gilda's reasonable requests, including but not limited to scholarships, commendation ceremonies, and any academic resources he might need in the future. If you do not comply, face the consequences. Thompson, who was currently wiping cold sweat in his office, saw the message. He was so angry he nearly smashed his phone. But what could he do? Facing a behemoth like the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. As a mere school board member, he could do nothing but rage impotently and eventually back down. Bastard. Thompson gritted his teeth. You win this round, kid. Chapter 18, 10,000 Worlds Shocking Palm. In the private room of the Japanese restaurant, the lighting was dim and ambiguous. Johnny sat cross-legged on the tatami mat with Felicia sitting opposite him, her face blooming like a flower. Come try this, the sea urchin in the shop is the freshest. Felicia picked up a piece of golden sea urchin but didn't put it in her own bowl. Instead, she leaned forward and held it right up to Johnny's mouth. In those cat-like eyes, there was an undisguised flicker of flirtation. Johnny wasn't shy either and opened his mouth to take it. The tip of his tongue accidentally brushed against the tips of Felicia's chopsticks. Felicia pulled her hand back as if she had received an electric shock. Two red clouds drifted onto her cheeks, but the smile in her eyes deepened. How does it taste? Fresh, tender, and smooth. Johnny commented meaningfully, but his gaze wasn't on the sea urchin. Instead, it fell on Felicia's bursting neckline. Just like you. You're terrible, Tilda. Felicia gave a coy huff and rolled her eyes at him. But in that tone was there even a hint of actual dislike. She was clearly enjoying it very much. After 3 rounds of drinks, Felicia put down her chopsticks. Her long, slender legs lightly brushed against Johnny's calves under the table. Hey Johnny. Yesterday in the alleyway, how did you actually do it? Felicia propped up her chin, a curious light shining in her eyes. The rhino and the vulture are both tough characters that give the New York police a headache. Especially that rhino. I heard even anti-tank missiles can't blast through his skin. And yet you shattered his jaw with a single punch. Yeah. And the fact that you can fly. Felicia leaned in closer, her breath like orchids. I heard rumors that you're a mutant, or some kind of super soldier from a secret lab. Seeing Felicia looking like a curious child, Johnny set down his glass, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. Want to know? Memla. Felicia nodded repeatedly. Actually, it's not that complicated. Johnny shrugged and brought out the same excuse he used to fool George and Carlson. I got lucky when I was a kid and found a glowing meteorite in the backyard. I touched it and then I became like this. Alien tech, if you know, you know. Really? Felicia's eyes widened in disbelief. It's that simple. It's that simple. Johnny spread his hands. Sometimes, life is even more magical than the movies. Wow. Felicia sighed in admiration, a hint of envy showing in her eyes. I really envy you, you're so lucky. Not only are you handsome, but you also have these superpowers. Unlike me, I can only rely on these hands to make a living. Saying so, she stretched out her long, fair hands and made a couple of grabbing motions in the air. Like a little wildcat sharpening its claws. Johnny smiled but didn't take the bait. He knew that this seemingly harmless school beauty before him was actually the future master thief Black Cat. Those hands could indeed make a living, and a pretty good one at that. The meal was very pleasant. Not only was Felicia beautiful, but she was also a smooth talker. And that subtle, constant flirting was something Johnny enjoyed very much. When it was time to pay, Felicia was the first to take out her bank card. This time is on me, as a thank you for satisfying my curiosity. Felicia winked at Johnny. However, as a return gift. Are you free tonight? I know a great bar where we can go for some in-depth communication. This hint was practically an explicit invitation. Johnny rubbed his chin. Although he really wanted to agree immediately. But considering he still had to deal with Gwen and, well, slow and steady wins the race. Let's keep in touch by phone. Johnny waved his phone, neither refusing nor agreeing immediately. This tactic of playing hard to get made the interest in Felicia's eyes even stronger, back at school just as he entered the classroom. Johnny ran straight into Gwen. Johnny, you're back. Gwen rushed over with a worried look, scanning Johnny from head to toe. How was it? The school board didn't give you a hard time, did they? I heard people from the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division took you away. They didn't slice you up for research, did they? Seeing Gwen's concerned look, Johnny felt a warmth in his heart. Don't worry, I'm fine. Johnny reached out and ruffled Gwen's blonde hair, pulling her into his arms. They just invited me for afternoon tea and chatted about maintaining world peace. See, I'm perfectly fine. Phew, that's good. Gwen breathed a sigh of relief and nuzzled her head against Johnny's chest. You scared me to death, I thought. Suddenly, Gwen's movement stopped. She scrunched up her nose and sniffed Johnny. Then she looked up, a hint of suspicion flashing in her deep blue eyes. Johnny, why do you have a scent of miso soup from a Japanese restaurant on you? And what is this perfume scent? It's so familiar, like. Johnny's heart skipped a beat. A woman's intuition was indeed terrifyingly sharp. Especially the daughter of a police chief, her investigative skills were maxed out. Oh, that. Johnny didn't bat an eye, his heart didn't even skip a beat as he proactively raised his arm to sniff it. On the way back, I ran into a perfume salesperson who insisted on spraying some on me. As for the miso soup, that was from the lunch boxes those strategic homeland intervention, enforcement, and logistics division agents were eating. The smell was too strong and some got on me. Is that so? Although Gwen was still a bit suspicious, she chose to believe him under Johnny's candid gaze. After all, in her heart, Johnny was a superhero who dared to face the rhino for the sake of justice. How could he possibly lie to her? All right, then stay away from those salespeople next time. Gwen muttered, helping Johnny straighten his collar. I don't like this smell. The afternoon classes were still boring. He finally made it through until school was out. Gwen originally wanted to drag Johnny to the park for a walk and enjoy some intimacy in the romantic twilight. But just as they stepped out of the school gate, her phone rang. Hello, Dad. Gwen answered the phone, her expression changing. There's a party at home tonight, I have to go back. But. Gwen glanced at Johnny beside her, hesitating. Then can I bring Johnny back with me? On the other end, Chief George Stacy's voice was inaudible. But judging by Gwen's increasingly disappointed expression, he had clearly refused. All right, I understand. Gwen hung up and looked at Johnny apologetically. Sorry, Johnny, my dad said there are important guests at home tonight, so it's not very convenient. Actually, I think he just doesn't want to see you. Gwen grumbled helplessly. It's fine, I understand. Johnny smiled and pinched her cheek. Father-in-laws are like that, they never like their son-in-laws. You go ahead, I also want to go back early and get some rest. Yesterday was too exhausting and I haven't quite recovered yet. Hearing the words too exhausting, Gwen's face instantly turned red. She naturally knew why Johnny was tired. Then you should get some good rest. Gwen stood on her tiptoes and pecked Johnny on the cheek. Then she got into her car, looking back every few steps after seeing Gwen off. Johnny stretched and prepared to ride his vintage bicycle home. Hi, handsome. A familiar figure appeared by his bike like a ghost. Felicia had changed into an even hotter outfit. A miniskirt, black stockings, and a midriff-barring camisole. She was practically a walking hormone dispenser. What a coincidence. Johnny raised an eyebrow. It's not a coincidence, I was specifically waiting for you. Felicia leaned against Johnny's bike, her long legs crossed in a seductive pose. I saw your girlfriend leave just now, you must be lonely all by yourself, right? How about it, want to go for a walk by the river together? The evening breeze is very pleasant right now. After the walk, we can go grab dinner together and then. Felicia winked at Johnny, her tongue lightly licking her red lips. Do some exercise that adults enjoy to help digest the food. This hint could no longer be called a hint. It was a straight-up proposition. Ding! Detected a significant increase in target Felicia Hardy's favorability toward the host. Current favorability, 95 irresistible. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the stage reward 10,000 World's Shocking Palm. Skill description, a secret technique of the Turtle Hermit School. It converts the chi within the body into high-voltage electric currents to fire at the opponent, possessing extremely strong paralysis and lethality. Note, Master Roshi once used this move to nearly instant-kill the great ape form of Son Goku. Holy crap! This is good stuff. Johnny's eyes instantly lit up. 10,000 World's shocking palm. This is a powerful crowd control skill. Not only can it cause damage, but it can also render the enemy immobile. It's practically an essential god-tier skill for any situation. With this, when I encounter those thick-skinned enemies in the future, I can just blast them with 100,000 volts and zap them until they're crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Wouldn't that be sweet? And Felicia's favorability is rising way too fast, isn't it? It's already at 95. It seems tonight is destined to be a sleepless night, since a beautiful lady has extended such a warm invitation. Johnny got on his bike and patted the back seat for Felicia. Then hop on. Hold on tight, I'm taking you for a ride. Felicia wasn't shy either and sat sideways on the back. Her hands naturally wrapped around Johnny's waist and her whole body pressed against his back. Feeling the soft sensation against his back, Johnny whistled, kicked off, and the bicycle shot out like an arrow from a bow, however. Just as the two were heading toward the riverside, chatting and laughing, they didn't notice. In a dark corner by the school gate, a black Ford sedan had already started up silently. Chapter 19, Cooling Down the Fire of the Young Lovebirds. The black Ford sedan followed 20 meters behind Gilda. The car windows were covered with deep black explosion-proof film, completely isolating the interior from the outside world. But inside this seemingly ordinary sedan, it was currently packed with ruthless characters enough to make the entire NYPD and even SHIEL break into a cold sweat. In the driver's seat, Bullseye chewed gum while playing with a playing card in one hand. His deadfish eyes held a trace of impatient murderous intent. I say, isn't that fat guy being a bit too cautious? In the back seat, a guy in green armor with a hideous face let out a sneer. Green Goblin Norman Osborn. Of course, he was still wearing a mask at the moment, so no one could see his arrogant face. To deal with a wet-behind-the-ears college student, he actually called all of us. Is that fat guy Kingpin so rich he has nowhere else to spend it? Cut the crap, Osborn. In the passenger seat, a man enveloped in blue electric arcs spoke coldly. Electro Max Dillon. Although he hadn't become a pure energy being like in the movies yet, the unstable sound of electricity still made one's heart race. That kid isn't simple. That idiot Rhino might be brainless, but his durability is second to none. To be able to knock Rhino unconscious with a single punch. The force of that punch, even your green armor might not be able to withstand it. Humph, that's because Rhino is too stupid. Green Goblin snorted disdainfully, playing with a pumpkin bomb in his hand. As long as I'm flying in the sky, he's just a sitting duck. Enough, everyone shut up. The man who had been sitting in the corner, wearing a large spherical helmet that looked like a fishbowl, spoke up. Mysterio Quentin Beck. His voice, processed by the helmet, sounded somewhat ethereal and eerie. The boss's mission is to capture him alive. Kingpin said he's very interested in this young man. He wants to sit down with him, have a nice cup of tea, and talk about life. Tusk, tusk, tusk. Bullseye spat out his gum, a look of disgust on his face. That fat guy, he wants to recruit anyone who's a talent. He's not afraid of biting off more than he can chew. However, Bullseye looked at the two figures strolling by the river in the distance. A cruel smile curled at the corner of his mouth. Since the boss paid, we have to do the job right. Go easy on him later, don't kill him outright. Especially that woman. Bullseye licked his lips. She looks quite succulent. The villains in the car glanced at each other and let out knowing, sinister laughs by the banks of the Hudson River. A gentle evening breeze blew, and the setting sun dyed the river's surface a golden red. Johnny pushed the vintage bicycle, and Felicia snuggled against his side like a lazy kitten. Their shadows stretched long on the ground, intertwining. Johnny, what do you want to do in the future? Felicia kicked a small pebble by the road and asked seemingly casually. Will you be like Captain America, a superhero in tights saving the world? Or like Stark being a playboy? Johnny stopped and looked at the shimmering river. A hero. He smiled, his eyes deep. Perhaps. But I'd rather be a powerhouse who does as he pleases. Only by being strong enough can you protect what you want to protect, right? For instance, Johnny turned his head and looked into Felicia's seductive eyes. Protecting a beautiful little wildcat like you. Tisk smooth talker. Felicia's face flushed slightly, but the joy in her eyes couldn't be hidden. She stretched, her beautiful curves fully revealed in the sunset. I don't want to be any kind of hero. It's too tiring and you're bound by all sorts of rules. I prefer being a free-spirited wildcat. Felicia leaned into Johnny's ear, her voice dropping, carrying a hint of mysterious temptation. I heard that the Tiffany & Co. store on Fifth Avenue just received a sapphire called the Heart of the Ocean. Its luster is as enchanting as your eyes. I was thinking if someone could steal it and give it to me one of these nights. Then I might just love him to death. This was a blatant hint. And a test. She was testing Johnny's bottom line and seeing if they were birds of a feather. Johnny raised an eyebrow. Good grief. Is she trying to recruit me to be a partner in crime? This plot is getting a bit exciting. Stealing is illegal, Miss Hardy. Johnny said solemnly. But a second later he smirked again. However, if it's to win a beauty's smile, playing the part of Kaido Kid occasionally doesn't seem too bad either. I'll consider it. Felicia's eyes lit up and she grabbed Johnny's arm, pressing herself against him. Then you'd better think it over carefully. If you decide. Tonight I have a reward. An hour later. An upscale Western restaurant in central Manhattan. The same formula, the same flavor. Red wine candles, steak. And the beauty across from him, whose eyes were becoming more blurred and whose face was growing more flushed. Johnny felt like he was just an emotionless favorability grinding machine. However, hey, Peter. Harry sat down beside Peter with natural ease. His innate aristocratic aura instantly made the ordinary dining table feel somewhat out of place. Harry, you came to eat at the cafeteria too. Peter was pleasantly surprised and hurriedly introduced both sides. Mary Jane, this is my best friend, Harry Osborne. Harry, this is Mary Jane. Hello, Mr. Osborne. Mary Jane's eyes instantly lit up. She reached out her hand, her smile significantly more radiant than when she was facing Peter just a moment ago. Johnny was all too familiar with that look. It was the look of someone seeing hope for social mobility. Then again, for a girl like Mary Jane who came from a terrible family and was desperate to make a name for herself. The young master of the Osborne group was practically a prince from a fairy tale. Even if this prince seemed a bit gloomy. Tusk tusk, poor Peter. Johnny sighed silently in his heart. How was this introducing a friend? This was clearly inviting a wolf into the house. In the original story, you were cheated on by these two so much your head was glowing green. Looking at it now, the wheels of history still had that familiar flavor. However, since he was destined to be cheated on, rather than letting Harry, this mentally unstable rich kid, benefit, it would be better to let me, a cheater dedicated to maintaining cosmic peace, benefit. Keep the good stuff within the family, so to speak. Is that Harry Osborne? Gwen also recognized the newcomer and was somewhat surprised. I didn't expect him to come to school. I heard the Osborne group has been making some big moves lately. You know him? I don't. Johnny wiped his mouth, stood up and straightened his collar. But I was just thinking of getting to know him. He looked at Gwen with a sincere, deceitful gaze. As you know, I'm researching that genetic decay rate project, and the Osborne group is an authority in that field. If I can get in touch with this crown prince, it would be a huge help to our research. After all, in this society, having more friends means having more paths. Gwen was stunned for a moment, then nodded. True, go ahead then, I'll wait for you. The reason was flawless. In the world of top students, academic exchange was always legitimate and noble. The corners of Johnny's mouth curled up slightly as he took long strides toward Peter's table. Hi, Peter. Johnny walked to the table and naturally rested one hand on the back of Peter's chair. What a coincidence, eating with friends. Peter looked up, saw it was Johnny and smiled. Johnny, you're here too. Johnny, you're here too. And this is? Johnny asked knowingly, his gaze falling on Harry. Oh, this is Harry Osborne. Peter hurriedly introduced him. Harry, this is Johnny Gilda, the one I mentioned to you. The tough guy who knocked out Rhino with one punch. Hearing this, Harry, who had been somewhat indifferent, suddenly had sharp eyes. He put down his knife and fork, stood up, and took the initiative to extend his hand. I've heard a lot about you. Your name has been spreading like crazy in New York's high society over the past 2 days. Even my father has been full of praise for you. Although Harry was arrogant, he also admired the strong. He gave enough respect to a powerhouse who could take on a supervillain solo. Mr. Osborn is too kind. Johnny smiled and shook Harry's hand, applying a bit of pressure. Harry's expression changed slightly, then he revealed a smile of even greater appreciation. Just call me Harry. All right, Harry. Johnny let go of his hand, and his gaze finally turned naturally to the red-haired beauty beside them. And who is this beautiful lady? Mary Jane had been unable to sit still for a long time. From the moment Johnny walked over, her eyes hadn't left the man. He was so handsome. That confidence and dominance radiating from his very bones. It was 100 times more charming than Harry's gloomy aristocratic vibe. Not to mention he was currently the most popular figure on campus, a mysterious superhero. Mary Jane Watson. Mary Jane took the initiative to extend her slender hand, brushing the red hair by her ear. She revealed a perfect smile that she had practiced countless times. You can call me MJ. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Gilda. She bit those last two words very lightly, with a hint of a seductive lilt. Johnny took her hand. Soft and smooth. As expected of a future big star, her skin maintenance was indeed impeccable. MJ, good name. Your aura is very special. It reminds me of those actresses from Hollywood's golden age. Interested in exchanging contact information? I've been investing in some film and television projects lately. Perhaps there will be opportunities to collaborate in the future. Investing in film and television. That was pure nonsense, of course. The only thing he was investing in was human genetic engineering. But for Mary Jane, who was desperate to enter the entertainment industry, this was a total knockout blow. Of course. Mary Jane's eyes were glowing as she quickly pulled out her phone. That's exactly what I was going to say. The process of the two exchanging numbers was extremely smooth. Seeing this, Harry beside them was not to be outdone. Since we're all friends, save mine too. Harry took out his phone and smiled at Mary Jane. The Osborn Group also has entertainment companies under its umbrella. Mary Jane naturally didn't refuse anyone, laughing so hard she trembled. Watching this harmonious scene, Johnny sneered in his heart. This kid Harry was indeed a closet flirt. Claiming to be a friend, yet his moves to pick up girls weren't slow at all. However, sorry. No matter how fast you are, can you be faster than my system? Ding! Detected that the host has successfully established contact with the target Mary Jane Watson, binding successful. Obtained initial binding reward, basic combat power plus 200. Host's current combat power, 2400. A familiar surge of heat flowed through him again. Johnny felt his strength reach a new level. 2400 points. This feeling was so damn good. Alright, I won't disturb you guys any further. Having achieved his goal, Johnny knew when to stop. After all, Gwen was still watching from over there. Going too far would easily cause trouble at home. My girlfriend is still waiting for me over there. He deliberately emphasized the word girlfriend. It was both for Harry to hear and to show his value to Mary Jane. In an open country like America, being taken only made one more sought after. See you later, everyone. Johnny turned and walked away coolly. Looking at Johnny's back, Harry took a sip of coffee, his eyes flickering. Peter, this friend of yours is very interesting. Peter gave a bitter smile and looked down at the pasta on his plate, which now tasted like wax. He wasn't stupid, he clearly saw the undercurrents during that brief exchange. Meanwhile, Mary Jane rested her chin on her hand, her gaze following Johnny the whole time. She didn't look away reluctantly until he sat back down beside Gwen. Harry, Peter. Mary Jane seemed to suddenly remember something and smoothed her hair. I have a very important audition on Broadway tonight. If you're free, could you come and support me? Of course, Peter immediately looked up, his eyes full of anticipation. No problem, Harry also nodded gentlemanly. Not far away. Johnny, who had overheard everything, smiled. A Broadway audition. Well, it had actually been a long time since he'd been to Broadway. It wouldn't be bad to go see Mary Jane's performance. And while he was at it, see if there was a chance to develop their relationship further. Johnny, what are you smiling about? You look so happy. Gwen looked at him curiously. Nothing. Johnny cut a piece of steak and fed it to Gwen, his gaze deep. I just suddenly feel that the night scenery tonight will be very beautiful. By the way, Gwen, I have to handle some private academic matters tonight. I might not be able to accompany you tonight. Chapter 23, Mary Jane's Band Spider-Gwen. Academic Personal Matters. Gwen blinked her large, azure eyes. Though a bit confused, she obediently nodded her head. All right then, don't work too hard. After all, you didn't get much rest the night before last. At this, Gwen's cheeks uncontrollably flushed with a hint of red again. Seeing her shy appearance, Johnny felt a surge of heat in his heart. He really wanted to pull her away right now to rest some more. However, for a greater goal, referring to the advanced versions of Kai Disc and Bukyujutsu. For the peace of the universe, referring to preventing MJ from ruining Peter. Johnny held back. Don't worry, I'll take care of myself. Johnny smiled meaningfully. To a genius like Johnny, the afternoon classes were as boring as listening to a monk chanting scriptures. Finally, the bell rang for the end of class. Gwen was clearly reluctant to leave, walking slowly beside Johnny while clutching her books. That clingy vibe, as if she wanted to hang herself on Johnny, was palpable. It caused tons of critical damage to the single dogs passing by. Just as the two were walking through the teaching building's corridor, preparing to head downstairs. The drum part of this song is still a bit weak, we need more explosive power. A familiar and somewhat assertive female voice drifted out from the nearby activity room. Immediately following, several girls carrying musical instruments pushed the door open and walked out. Leading them was the one with fiery red hair. Mary Jane Watson, who was the center of attention wherever she went. At this moment, she had changed into a leather jacket with a slight rock and roll style. Those tight leather pants outlined her long legs in a heart-stopping way. Wild and sexy. Completely different from the girl-next-door socialite style she had in the cafeteria at noon. MJ. Johnny raised an eyebrow and stopped in his tracks. Mary Jane also saw Johnny. Her face, which had been serious while discussing with her teammates, instantly blossomed into a bright smile. Hi, Gilda. She walked over quickly. Her gaze lingered on Johnny for a moment before seemingly casually sweeping toward Gwen beside him. What a coincidence. Indeed, quite a coincidence. Johnny smiled, his gaze inconspicuously brushing over the girls behind her carrying guitars and basses. I just heard you talking about drum beats, you've formed a band. Of course. Mary Jane confidently tossed her red hair. The Mary Jane Band, I'm the lead singer. How about it, interested in coming to hear our rehearsal? We have a performance for the school anniversary in a few days. This invitation sounded like it was addressed to both of them. But those alluring eyes were fixed squarely on Johnny. Johnny didn't agree directly, merely shrugging noncommittally. If I'm free, I'll consider it. At this moment, Mary Jane seemed to only just officially notice Gwen. She sized Gwen up, a flash of amazement in her eyes. But it also hid an imperceptible trace of competitiveness. This must be your girlfriend, right? So beautiful, this temperament, tusk, simply born for the stage. Gwen was a bit embarrassed by the praise and politely reached out her hand. Hello, I'm Gwen Stacy. Gwen, good name. Mary Jane shook Gwen's hand, suddenly as if thinking of something, her eyes lit up. Hey Gwen, are you interested in joining our band? Huh. Gwen was stunned, clearly not keeping up with Mary Jane's train of thought. Me, but I don't know how to play any instruments. It doesn't matter. Mary Jane was a bit overly enthusiastic as she directly grabbed Gwen's arm. Technique can be practiced, but looks and temperament are innate. Our band just happens to need a drummer who can command the stage. I think your image is perfect. Besides, playing the drums is a great way to relieve stress. Watching Mary Jane's overly familiar manner, and then seeing Gwen's expression change from initial bewilderment to gradual interest. Standing to the side, Johnny's gaze became somewhat strange. The Mary Jane Band. Gwen Stacy. Drummer. This plot development feels a bit familiar. Johnny rubbed his chin. In the setting of the parallel universe Spider-Gwen he had seen, Gwen seemed to be the drummer for the Mary Jane Band, right? And if it follows this script, doesn't that mean Gwen is very likely to be bitten by that damn radioactive spider later on? And then put on that classic black and white hooded bodysuit. The image instantly flashed through Johnny's mind. The design of that suit was famous for showing off the figure, especially the lines of the legs and buttocks. If Gwen really wore that and swayed in front of him, or even wore it while having academic exchanges with him, Johnny felt some of his DNA stir. That visual impact would definitely be 100 times more exciting than simple JK uniforms or black stockings. Seems not bad. Johnny silently gave Mary Jane a thumbs up in his heart. What a great assist. Since MJ said so, Gwen, you could give it a try. Johnny added fuel to the fire at the right time. I also think you'd look very charming playing the drums on stage. Hearing her boyfriend's support, the hesitation in Gwen's eyes completely vanished. Then I'll try. Awesome. Mary Jane excitedly exchanged contact information with Gwen. With that level of enthusiasm, one would think they were long-lost sisters. Of course. Johnny knew very well. Mary Jane was using the curved path to save the country tactic. Pull the main wife into her circle first and build a good relationship. Only then would she have more opportunities to get close to him in the future. This woman's level was indeed a bit higher than a direct player like Felicia at the school gate. Then I'll head out first, Johnny. Gwen, holding her books, stood on her tiptoes and printed a kiss on Johnny's lips. Rest early tonight, don't get too tired. Don't worry, go ahead. Johnny watched Gwen get into Chief George's police car until the taillights disappeared around the corner. All right. The one at home is settled. Next. Time to go into the wild. Johnny mounted his vintage bicycle and kicked off. The wheels spun rapidly, heading toward the most prosperous part of Manhattan. Speeding toward Broadway in front of the Schubert Theater. A black Bentley Mulsanne slowly pulled up to the curb. The car door opened. Harry Osborn, wearing a well-tailored haute couture suit, stepped out with elegance. Following him was Peter Parker, wearing a slightly cheap suit and looking a bit constrained. Finally, it was Mary Jane, dressed up and as charming as a red rose. Thanks for dropping us off, Harry. Mary Jane brushed her hair and gave Harry a charming smile. This car is really comfortable to ride in. It's my honor to serve you, MJ. Harry bowed slightly like a gentleman, his eyes full of admiration. Peter, watching the two interact from the side, felt sour in his heart. But he still forced himself to cheer up, clenching his fist to encourage Mary Jane. MJ, your audition today will definitely be a success, you're the best. From your mouth to God's ears, Peter. Mary Jane smiled at Peter, but the smile was clearly more polite than anything else. Let's go, let's head inside. Harry glanced at his watch. I've already had the best box seats arranged, we can watch you shine on stage. The three walked into the theater entrance chatting and laughing. And just as their figures disappeared behind the doors, screech! The sound of braking rang out. Johnny put one foot down, stopping at the base of the theater's steps. He looked up at the giant sign flashing with neon lights. The Phantom of the Opera. Tusk Broadway. Johnny casually locked his bicycle to a roadside railing. The last time I came here to see a play seems to have been back in high school. He straightened his black casual suit. Though not as extravagantly wealthy as Harry, with that face and his tall, straight build. Standing there, he was perfect material for street photography. However, who among decent people comes to see a play? A wicked smile curled at the corner of Johnny's mouth. He didn't come here to cultivate his mind. He came for that red-haired stunner and the system's tempting reward. Peter and Harry are both here. Even better. The thrill of poaching right under a good brother's nose. That's the essence of the many children, many blessings system. Johnny strode with his long legs to the ticket office. One ticket for the seat with the best view. Preferably the kind where I can see the backstage clearly. Chapter 24, Tombstone Lacking Eyes. The interior decor of the Schubert Theater was the height of luxury. Huge crystal chandeliers, red velvet curtains. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the stench of decaying wealth. Johnny had bought a ticket for a corner seat on the top floor. Although the view here was a bit skewed, it was quiet and very high up. Standing here, the entire layout of the theater was laid bare before him. Whether it was the lighting on the stage or the movements in the VIP boxes below, nothing escaped his eyes. Johnny leaned against the railing, fiddling with a coin in his hand. His gaze fell upon a luxury box on the second floor. There Harry Osborne was elegantly crossing his legs, holding a glass of champagne. Peter Parker sat beside him, looking somewhat stiff. Clutching a bottle of Coke, his eyes stared nervously at the stage. The rich end up together, while the poor watch with their own eyes. Johnny shook his head, a playful smirk playing on the corners of his mouth. However, he wasn't here today to watch these two besties act all bromantic. His gaze shifted slightly. Passing through the curtains at the side of the stage, he locked onto the backstage area. Backstage outside the dressing room, Mary Jane had changed into a medieval court gown. The corset cinched her proud bust to the point of overflowing. Her snow-white skin shimmered with a porcelain-like luster under the lights. Her red hair was pinned up high, revealing a long, elegant swan neck. Beautiful. Breathtakingly beautiful. It had to be said, this woman was indeed a natural stunner. Whether it was the purity of a girl next door or the nobility of a stage queen, she could handle it all with ease. Tusk, this figure, this aura. Johnny rubbed his chin, his eyes becoming somewhat heated. If she could wear this outfit and kneel. Johnny timely cut off those NSFW images in his mind. After all, he was in a public place now, he had to mind his image. At this moment, the audition backstage seemed to have already begun. Mary Jane was performing a monologue for several judges. Her voice was very infectious, and her expressions were perfectly on point. Even the director, who had been keeping a stiff face, couldn't help but nod, showing a satisfied expression. It seemed this audition was in the bag. As long as no accidents happened. However, right then, an accident arrived. Bang! The iron door backstage, which had been tightly closed, was violently kicked open. Several burly men in black suits with faces full of muscle barged in. Leading them was a tall, bald man whose skin had an eerily pale, deathly white hue. Tombstone, one of the gang leaders of New York's underworld. Also a capable lieutenant under Kingpin, though he occasionally worked solo. As soon as this guy appeared, the originally noisy backstage instantly fell silent. The murderous aura, as if he had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, made everyone present feel suffocated. Who is Mary Jane? Tombstone looked around, his voice low and raspy. His gaze quickly locked onto Mary Jane, who was standing in the center of the stage. A flash of lewd light flickered in his eyes. Oh, found her. She really is top tier. Tombstone grinned, revealing a mouthful of forest white teeth. He strode forward, ignoring the staff members who were furious but didn't dare to speak up. He stood directly in front of Mary Jane. His height, over 1.9 meters, was like a wall, completely shrouding Mary Jane in shadow. Little girl, you look good. Tombstone reached out a large hand, wanting to touch Mary Jane's face. Come with me. I've opened a private room upstairs, there's good wine and a good show. I just happen to be missing a leading lady to have a couple of drinks with me. Mary Jane's face turned pale and she instinctively took a step back, dodging the hand. Sir, I am auditioning. She tried her best to remain calm, but her voice still carried a hint of trembling. Please have some self-respect. Auditioning. Tombstone acted as if he had heard a hilarious joke. Ha ha ha, auditioning for what? He turned his head and gave the director a cold glance. Hey, old man. I've taken a liking to this girl. The leading lady for this play is her. Do you have a problem with that? The director was so scared he was trembling, shaking his head repeatedly. No, no problem, of course no problem. See. Tombstone turned back to look at Mary Jane again, the smile on his face becoming even more insolent. This is the rule. In this Broadway, if I say you're the leading lady, you're the leading lady. But on the condition that... He took another step closer, the nauseating smell of tobacco and blood hitting Mary Jane's nostrils. You have to serve this lord well first. Come with me, and after tonight you'll be the most famous star on Broadway. Otherwise... Tombstone's gaze suddenly turned cold. Forget about acting. Whether you can walk out of this theater in one piece will be a question. This was a blatant threat. Mary Jane bit her lip hard, her eyes rimmed with red. She just wanted to be an actress, to make a name for herself through her own efforts. Why? Why did she always have to run into scum like this? On the high balcony, Johnny, who had seen everything, had eyes that instantly turned cold. Tombstone. Johnny let out a cold laugh, the coin in his hand being squeezed out of shape. A piece of underworld trash. Dares to touch the woman I've set my sights on. I think you find your name isn't auspicious enough and want to actually set up a tombstone for yourself, huh? He had originally wanted to wait for Mary Jane's audition to end for a romantic encounter. But it was ruined by this guy. This wasn't just disturbing his elegant mood. It was a provocation to his authority. In this Marvel universe, as long as it was prey targeted by him, Johnny Gilda, it was already marked with his label. Except for him, no one could touch it. Not even if God himself came. Seeking death. Johnny's body moved slightly, preparing to fly over directly and give this white-skinned pig a lesson. To let him know why the flowers are so red. However, just at the moment he was about to act, his movement suddenly stopped. That's Harry and Peter. Ahem. Johnny raised an eyebrow and pulled back his stepped-out foot. It seems I'm not the only knight in shining armor. True. That kid Harry is one of the financial backers of this theater. Causing trouble on his turf isn't that slapping him in the face. Johnny leaned back against the railing, watching the movements below with interest. Since someone was willing to go up and trigger the landmine first, then he didn't mind watching the show for a bit. Just right. He also wanted to see this crown prince of the Osborne group. Exactly how much weight he carried. Most importantly, he understood that a character like Tombstone wouldn't have any fear of Harry just because of his Osborne background. Might as well let them go first. When the time came, appearing last as the hero, he would be able to capture Mary Jane's heart even more. Chapter 25, Harry, your father is dead. Backstage. Mary Jane huddled in a corner, her exquisite face now as pale as paper. Just as Tombstone's rough, large hand was about to touch her trembling shoulder. Stop! A sharp shout accompanied by hurried footsteps broke the suffocating silence. Bang! The dressing room door was kicked open once again. Harry Osborne, dressed in an expensive suit, rushed in with Peter Parker. Seeing them, Mary Jane, who had been in despair, suddenly had a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Harry, Peter. She sounded as if she were grasping at a final straw, her voice carrying a hint of a sob. Save me. When the director saw Harry, he felt as if he had received a grand pardon, nearly kneeling down to call him young master. In this capital-driven New York, the name Osborne was sometimes more effective than the mayor's. Tombstone stopped what he was doing. He slowly turned around, his grayish-white, lifeless eyes cold. He coldly scanned the two uninvited guests. Oh, look who it is. Tombstone grinned, revealing forest-white teeth, his tone tinged with amusement. Isn't this the crown prince of the Osborne group? What's the matter, not drinking champagne in your mansion but coming to a low-class place like this to experience life? Facing Tombstone's mockery, Harry forced down the nervousness in his heart. He straightened his back and adjusted his slightly messy tie. He attempted to maintain the dignity and majesty of a top-tier second-generation wealthy heir. I am one of the shareholders of this theater. Harry lifted his chin, looking down at Tombstone with a condescending gaze. Here my word is the law. Mister, I don't care what path you walk in the underworld. Now, immediately, get out of my territory and stay away from Miss Watson. Otherwise, the Osborne Group's legal team and security department will make you understand the meaning of regret. Harry spoke these words with powerful conviction. In the past, within New York's social circles, as long as he brought up the name of the Osborne Group, he was basically invincible. However, this time he had clearly miscalculated. Tombstone burst into a fit of harsh, wild laughter as if he had heard some grand joke. The laughter shook the surrounding glass until it hummed. Osborne legal team. Kid, have you failed to grasp the situation? Tombstone abruptly stopped laughing and took a step forward, his massive shadow directly enveloping Harry. This is the backyard of Hell's Kitchen, not your Wall Street. You've got guts to talk to me like that, just like your dead old man, you've got some spirit. Harry frowned, a faint sense of foreboding rising in his heart. What do you mean, how do you know my father? How do I know him, Hesh? Tombstone leaned in close to Harry, a nauseating scent of blood wafting over him. He lowered his voice, his tone ominous. Young Master Harry, aren't you curious why you haven't been able to contact your great father since last night? The executives of the Osborne Group are all looking for him, and you can only claim to the outside world that he's on vacation. Tisk, what a filial son. Harry's expression changed instantly. It was true. Since last night, his father Norman Osborne had gone missing. Calls wouldn't go through, no one was home, and even the flight glider and green goblin armor were gone. But he had always assumed his father was in some secret lab conducting that damned human enhancement experiment. How do you know what I've done, and do you know where he is? Harry's voice began to tremble, and the arrogant aura from before dissipated by more than half. Of course I know. Tombstone's gaze was playful, like he was looking at a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Because we all work for the same boss. Last night, your old man in his green goblin persona followed Bullseye and the others to find trouble with a young man. The result? Tombstone reached out and made a slice gesture across his neck. Wiped out. Even the bodies were tossed into the Hudson River to feed the fish. What? Harry felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He staggered back 2 steps, nearly falling to the floor. Father is dead. The invincible Norman Osborne dead. How is that possible? No, you're lying, that's impossible. Harry roared, but the panic in his eyes had already betrayed him. Believe it or not. Tombstone shrugged with an air of indifference. Anyway, this news will spread through the entire underworld by tomorrow morning. I'm thinking if I release this news right now. Tisk, will the Osborne Group's stock price drop to the value of scrap paper tomorrow? When that time comes, will you, a crown prince who has lost his father's protection, still be able to shout at me like this? These words were like a heart-piercing sword, ruthlessly stabbing through Harry's psychological defenses. Without his father and without the deterrent power of the Osborne Group. In the eyes of these outlaws, Harry Osborne, was just a fat sheep that could be crushed at any time. He opened his mouth, wanting to argue, wanting to threaten. But he found he couldn't even manage a complete sentence. His legs wouldn't stop shaking. Seeing Harry's terrified state, Tombstone gave a disdainful snort. If you know what's good for you, get lost. Go back and drink a few more bottles of good wine before you go bankrupt. With that, Tombstone waved his hand. The several burly men in black behind him immediately closed in with sinister grins. Pairs of ill-intentioned eyes scanned Harry's expensive suit. Watching this, Mary Jane's heart went completely cold. She had originally thought Harry was a legendary hero, arriving on colorful clouds. The result, he just chickened out. He didn't even dare to resist. Despair once again shrouded her heart. However, just then, Peter Parker, who had been standing behind Harry without speaking, spoke up. Even though he was afraid and his legs were shaking. When he saw the look of despair in Mary Jane's eyes, the hot-blooded sense of justice in his heart still clouded his judgment. Don't touch her. Peter suddenly rushed forward, spreading his arms. He stood in front of Mary Jane and Harry. His thin frame looked so ridiculous in front of Tombstone. This is a public place. What you're doing is illegal. I've already called the police. I order you to leave here immediately. Peter's voice was loud, but it clearly lacked confidence. It even carried a slight tremor. Hearing this, the entire backstage fell into a brief, dead silence. Then, Tombstone laughed so hard that tears almost came out. He looked at Peter as if looking at a fool. Order mate. Kid, have you studied yourself into stupidity? Or do you also want to take a swim in the Hudson River? Harry, this is your friend. Tombstone shook his head, his gaze suddenly turning fierce. It seems you've chosen the hard way. Since you don't want to leave, then don't leave at all. Beat them. Tombstone gave a look. His subordinates, who had been unable to hold back, immediately pounced like wolves and tigers. Bang! The man in the lead landed a punch directly on Peter's face. Peter cried out in pain as he was sent flying, crashing heavily into the dressing table. Bottles and jars shattered all over the floor. Peter! Mary Jane cried out in alarm. Before she could react, two burly men had already grabbed Harry from both sides. Let me go, do you know who I am? Harry struggled desperately, but how could someone raised in luxury be a match for these professional thugs? Slap! A harsh slap landed on Harry's face. Shut up, you little brat. The scene instantly spiraled out of control. Violence, chaos, screaming, and on the high level stands above the theater. Johnny Gilda played with the deformed coin in his hand, taking in everything below. Watching Harry go from arrogant to broken, and watching Peter go from brave to being taken down in seconds. Tusk. Is this the so-called hero saving the beauty? It's too tragic, I can't even look. Johnny shook his head and straightened his sleeves. Although Harry and Peter's performance was pathetic, it had to be said. They had indeed secured the perfect timing for his entrance. Mary Jane was currently in a state of extreme fear and despair. At a time like this, as long as a beam of light shone in, even if it was just a little bit, she would throw herself at it without hesitation and hold on tight. Furthermore, his beam of light was a 2400-watt super searchlight. All right. The supporting actors' scenes are finished. Now it's time for the protagonist's entrance. Johnny turned around, choosing not to fly straight down. That would be too shocking and might scare Mary Jane. If he was going to act, he had to go through with the full performance. He wanted that sense of romance that seemed like a coincidence but was actually destined. He strode with his long legs toward the side door leading backstage. There the lighting was just right. The atmosphere was perfectly set. Hey guys, before I go, I just want to be real with you for a second. I've been working hard on this channel and I've applied for AdSense 3 times now and got rejected every time. It's been discouraging, but your support is what keeps me going. If you're enjoying this content, the biggest thing you can do for me right now is hit that subscribe button, drop a like, share this video, and leave a comment. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. Together, we're going to make this channel grow. I'm not giving up, and that's a promise. See you in the next one.